That's all right. We're glad to have you on Zoom. So actually, if you guys on Zoom will just throw your name in the chat box, would be awesome, so that I just have a record of who was in class, and I'm going to pass out for the people in the person to sign in when they're here. So anyway, so thank you for being here. So the idea of what we're going to do this week is we're going to be going through and we're going to talk about basically all the stuff that you wish, or you thought maybe, I don't know, wish, thought, one of the two, that they would have taught you in real estate school, but they didn't. Because in real estate school, what happened is they taught you how to pass the test. They actually didn't teach you how to go and sell real estate. And so just to kind of give a little bit of the background so that everybody knows my background and kind of has a little bit of knowledge about me, is I have had my license, and I'm somewhat ashamed to say, although I probably shouldn't be, but next month will be 30 years that I have had my real estate license. So I was like 10 when I started. No, but I was young when I started, actually. So anyway. But I have spent about the last 15 to 20 years, I guess, probably closer to 20, but training real estate agents. And during that time, I jokingly say this. So even though like what I'm going to say, I don't actually mean it. I'm joking when I say it. But I like to jokingly say that I am the reason that the Salt Lake Board of Realtors does not give out a Rookie of the Year award anymore. Because, and here's why I jokingly say that. So they used to every year recognize the Rookie of the Year for the Salt Lake Board of Realtors. But I like to say that the reason they don't do that anymore is my fault. And it's, when I say that, what I mean is because during the 11 years that they gave away an award for the Rookie of the Year, 8 out of the 11 years that I have done training, someone who came through what I'm going to teach you guys in this week won the Rookie of the Year. So that's why I jokingly say they realized that it was whoever was in my training program would end up being the Rookie of the Year, so they just quit giving away the award. And I don't actually know why they quit. In fact, I should ask, and that actually brings me to the next thing that I want to just bring up on this is, so what the classes are going to look like this week is we're going to be Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday. And the reason that we're not doing Wednesday is because I am on the board of directors for the Salt Lake Board of Realtors, and I have a board of directors meeting on Wednesday. So that's why we're doing Monday, Tuesday, Thursday. So at my meeting, I will ask, why did we get rid of the Rookie of the Year award? And I am 100% certain they will not say because it was my fault, but I like to pretend and believe that that's the case. So part of why I say that, though, is because I do want you guys to know and understand that what we're going to go through and talk about this week is really designed to help you, and it will work. And that's the reason I tell you that 8 out of the 11 Rookies of the Year came through the training program, is because I know that this works and will help you to be successful in real estate, because I watched it and have seen a number of agents do that, which, by the way, during that 8 to 11 years, part of that I was with a different company, and part of that was me being here at Century 21 Everest. So that's why I know it has to do not just with the company, but also just with the training and things. So here's what it's going to look like. Is this morning we're going to go through and we're going to talk about what I like to call, and what we call, the foundation. And where that came from actually is from the founder of our company came up with this idea. And what happened was this, and again, this was about 30 years ago, is he was working for sale by owners and expired listings. And he started to notice that agents were beating him on working these for sale by owners and expireds and getting listings. And so he got a sticky note and said, okay, I have to figure out what is it that top producing agents have or do that I'm not doing or not aware of or whatever, so that I need to change so that I could become one of these top producing agents. And what he did is he then came up with 6 things. So we're going to start today and go through and talk about that. Now keep in mind, I'm not ready to do that just yet because I'm still just giving you an overview of what this week is going to look like. And so we're going to start today where I'm going to go through and I'm going to talk about those 6 things. And we're going to spend most of, if not all of this morning talking about those 6 things and how you need to implement those 6 things that will help you to be successful in real estate as well. Then what we'll do is then this afternoon, and depending on how long this morning it goes, and when I say part of that depends on is, you will notice as I stand up here and talk to you guys that I'm not, it's not like I have a script that I'm following. I have enough information that I could probably teach you guys 8 hours a day for 2 weeks straight and still probably not cover everything that I could help you with. And so I say that because I want the interaction. And so just know that I'm okay if you guys interrupt me and say, how does that work? Or even to say, I don't believe that. Like, that's totally fine too. You can say that. But just know, I want to cover and help you with whatever it is you guys want. And the more questions you have, the better information I'm going to give to you that will be relevant to exactly what you want to have. So I say that of depending on how long it takes, either this afternoon, before lunch or afternoon, we're going to jump into then and we're going to talk about, we're going to talk about lead generation and how do you get leads? Where should they come from? And I'm going to give you multiple options of how to go about getting that. But we're going to really focus on the principles and the fundamentals of how do you convert a lead. So 1, how do I find them? And then 2, now that I found them, how do I actually convert that into an appointment is what we will talk about. Like I say, either right before lunch or right after lunch, we'll do that. So we'll stop for lunch at about noon, and then I usually like to take an hour and a half break for lunch. And the reason being is that way I can return phone calls, you guys can return phone calls, we can do all the whatever little stuff we need to do, plus get some food. Then in the afternoon, we will go through and talk about that lead generation. Then tomorrow we will pick up wherever we leave off today in terms of the lead generation, where, again, helping you through that piece of it. And then after that, so we will spend really most of it tomorrow morning going through all of that as well. Then in the afternoon, we're going to go through and talk about, okay, so now that you've learned how to set appointments, how to get appointments with people, then what I'm going to do is in the afternoon, we're going to first talk about some time management stuff. I'm going to give you a formula that you can use that will either help you get your business started, or if you're ever in a rut, if you're ever in a slump, this formula that I'll give to you tomorrow afternoon will help you get out of that rut. But then also we're going to talk about, okay, I've gotten an appointment, and now what do I do with it? And probably the number one question that I have had over the last 15 to 20 years in training is, I need a good listing presentation. People want to know what's a good listing presentation. And so I'm going to give you tomorrow what I feel like is the best listing presentation that exists. And it's not a bunch of stuff. I'll tell you that. A lot of times that's what people mean is, I need a good listing presentation. They want some stuff. And I'm going to teach you actually the process to go through in a listing presentation so that you're prepared for that. Then what we are going to do on then Thursday is, so tomorrow afternoon, Tuesday afternoon, we'll all be like, okay, how do I get a listing with a seller? Then Thursday morning, we're going to go through and talk about, okay, what's the buyer presentation look like? And I'm going to walk you through that whole thing of the buyer presentation. And then in the afternoon on Thursday is where we're going to go through and we're going to talk about the working your sphere of influence. And I will tell you, if you don't get anything else, if you miss everything we talk about, do not miss the SOI stuff we're going to talk about on Thursday afternoon, because working your sphere of influence is the number one thing you've got to do in this business. If you will do that, the business will get easier and better for you the longer you're in the business. But most agents don't do it. And I'm going to give you a formula on that of I like to say working your sphere of influence is a math problem. It's not a people problem, it's a math problem. And if you will follow the math that I'm going to teach you on Thursday about how to do that, what you will find is the business should be much simpler to do in the long run. So anyway, any questions so far on Zoom or in person? Anything? And if not, that's great. We'll jump into it. Okay. I'm going to take that as no, which real quick, I do see people putting their names and stuff in the chat, which is awesome. Just do keep in mind, for you guys that are on Zoom, I will try to kind of glance over and look at where the chat box is, but it'll be better for you guys on Zoom to just unmute if you can and ask a question. Or if somebody does throw it in the chat box, maybe the people who are on Zoom, like sometimes somebody can't unmute for some reason and they'll type it in. If that happens and one of you guys on Zoom notices there's a question in there, unmute and interrupt me and tell me to look at it because I might miss it. So anyway, okay, so here's where we're going to start. So we're going to talk about the foundation. But before we get into the foundation, I like to start with, and you guys are going to see that I am not an artist, and hopefully you guys on Zoom will be able to see this well enough. If you can't, I do have a solution. I can pull out my iPad, and I think I can get it and draw on there to where you guys can see. So, but hopefully you can see well enough on the board here. But feel free to ask questions or whatever. So I want to start with first, if you think about building a house, we're going to talk about the foundation of real estate, of what it takes to be successful in real estate, and these 6 things. But before that, underneath the foundation of a house are going to be footings, and they put the footings in place to be a secure or to help the foundation. So let's think about it that way. Here's where we're going to start. By the way, a lot of this stuff that we talk about initially here might even feel a little bit like, what does this have to do with real estate? This isn't just real estate or whatever, but just stick with me because you'll see how it all ties in. So think of it this way, and again, I'm not an artist, but I'm going to draw here on the board, and although that might not be quite dark enough, let me see if I got a better color. It might show up a little better. Hopefully that's a little better, I don't know. Anyway, so if you had to guess what that is, any ideas?
A 3-legged stool.
Good job. So I did okay because Alicia got it. She said it's a 3-legged stool. That's exactly right. So this is a 3-legged stool, and think of it this way. So as we go through and we start to talk about this foundation, here's what we have found is if this stool represents your life, okay, so this is the stool of your life. It consists, there are 3 legs in this stool of your life. And the first one over here, the first leg is what we would call, we'll say finances. But you could say it also as your business, or you could say money as well, and that's fine. But think of it, one leg of this stool is your finances, it's your business, it's money, okay? So that's one leg. The next leg of this stool is, you could say it as family, or you could say relationships, something like that. So family or relationships, okay? And then the last leg of this, you could call fitness, or maybe we do /health, okay? So your life, this stool of your life has, this 3-legged stool has 3 legs to it. The 3 legs of this are your finances, your family and relationships, and when again, finances could be business or money, and then fitness or health. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you stop and just think about for a minute, think about how when you see people online trying to sell you something, generally what people will target is one of three areas. There are one of three areas that get highlighted of people trying to sell you. And I used to say back, this was back before pretty much everything we watched was just streaming now. But before that, when it was on TV, and I would say late at night, if you went and turned on the TV, and this might still happen actually, but if you go turn on the TV late at night, what you are going to see is these infomercials, and those infomercials always fall into one of three categories. And I would say even pay attention online when you're scrolling through Instagram or social media. What you will see is generally the things people try to advertise to you fall into one of these three areas. They're either trying to sell you on, we're going to teach you how to make $1 million, or they're going to talk about, we're going to help you in your relationship with your family or your spouse or significant other, whatever, or they talk about and try to sell you on fitness. So pretty much everything that the people try to sell you on are going to be one of these three areas. And the reason for that is these are the legs of the stool of your life. So keep in mind that part of what I believe is in order for you to be successful in life, you have to be successful in three different areas. In your finances, in your family, and fitness. So the three F's: family, fitness, finance. Now, everything we're going to talk about today, keep in mind, well, let me back up. If I actually had here a three-legged stool, and we were to take out one of the legs, what happens to that stool?
It still stands, it's wobbly.
Yeah, it's going to be wobbly, and depending on which leg and how it's set up, like I could probably still sit on it. But what happens if I pull out a second one? Yeah, you're going to fall over unless somehow it was perfectly balanced in the middle, you might be okay. Well, think about that for a minute. And the example I like to use in this area of this about how in order for your life to be really successful, it falls into being successful in these three different areas, is the example I like to use is Tiger Woods. Tiger Woods, in case anybody doesn't know, and I'm assuming everybody knows who Tiger Woods is, but Tiger Woods, professional golfer, just turned 50, and arguably the best golfer ever. But if you look at what has happened to him, he was at the peak of his game, and then he got messed up in his relationship with his wife. And then what happened as a result of that was his golf game went downhill. And then he also even ended up having issues he has back problems, and he came to Park City here to get knee surgery. Like, if you stop and look at that, how these things are related, when he got out of whack in one area, it then affected the other areas. And that's my message of this to begin with, is I have watched in my training of agents over the last 20-ish years, I have watched agents come in and go, okay, I'm going to put everything I have into being successful in real estate, and they neglect their family or their fitness. But more so, I would say, I see they come in and go crazy on real estate and they end up divorced. Like, I have seen that happen so many times because they get so caught up in doing everything real estate that they neglect this area. And so I want to make sure that I am emphasizing to you of keep in mind, we want to be balanced in each of these areas. We do not want to go crazy in just one and neglect the other. Because if you do, it then affects the other areas of your life. The other example I like to use real quick on that is Larry Miller. Everybody in Utah knows who Larry Miller is. Brought the Jazz here, owns all the car dealerships. Also died at, I don't remember exact age, 60-something years old. Well, what did he die from? Does anybody know? I'll let anybody on Zoom, you guys can answer too if you want. But he had diabetes. And it ended up taking his life because he had neglected that area of his life. Now, he wrote a book. The name of that book is called Driven by Larry Miller. In that book, he talks about that he was so focused, again, on the finance part of it. He wasn't a very good dad, and obviously he neglected his health, which then ended up taking his life, so obviously affecting the rest of this. So just keep in mind, as we go through and talk about all this stuff, and yes, we're going to spend the majority of our time talking about business, finances, money, all that kind of stuff, but keep in mind, as we go through and talk about all this stuff, don't neglect your family and don't neglect your health and those type of things as well. Okay, now, so with that, we're now going to jump into, I got to get my eraser here. I'm going to erase this. So now with that, we're going to jump into now and talk about the pieces that George Morris, the founder of the company, that he figured out is as he sat and observed and said, okay, what is it that top producing agents have or do that I don't or that I need to get in order to be successful? And what he found was there were 6 things. So we're going to go through this morning, we're going to talk about these 6 things. And the first thing that he found is they have a purpose, or you could say it as a vision, you could say it as dreams, or you could say it as a why, okay? So the first thing that he found is top producing agents. The top producers all have a clear vision of where they want to go. They have a purpose, something that they are working towards that is not just money, by the way. It can't be just about money, but it's got to be something that is saying, okay, I have something bigger than myself that I want to do and create. So they have a purpose, they have a vision of where they're going, which, and again, this is one of those other things I wasn't intending to talk about, but I'll point out to you real quick, that UCLA did a study of people in the top 2%. And the first thing that they figured out of these people in the top 2% is they have a clear vision of where they want to go. So people who are in the top 2% have a clear vision of where they're headed. So you got to have a purpose, you got to have some vision, some dreams that you're working towards, and the other way we just say it is a why. You got to have, what's your why? You hear people talk about that all the time. What's your why? And I have found that most agents don't do this. They skip this step and go to step number 2, which we'll talk about in a bit. But the step number 2 is about goals. And most agents will do, okay, I'm going to set my goals. And here we are, January of 2026. We need to have our goals set of like what we want to accomplish, right? Well, first, before that, before you set the goals, and we're gonna dive in pretty deep onto the goals section of this in a minute. But before we do, I want to make sure that we highlight and talk about this. You first have to understand, what is the purpose? What is your vision? What is it that you're wanting to accomplish? And I have found most agents struggle with that. And in fact, I would even say to some extent, I maybe even still struggle with that a little. But I'm going to give you an idea of how you can do something to help you figure out what is your why, okay? Because I have found a lot of times people are like, I don't know if I have a why, or I do, or it's just, people will say, it's my family. And I feel like it's got to be even deeper than just my family. I'm not saying it can't be your family. That's not what I'm saying. But I would say, keep in mind that it's typically going to be deeper than just my family, okay? So here's how I figured out for me. Here's what I did. And what I would recommend for you to do, if you're struggling with, I don't know if I know what my why is, I am going to give to you an exercise that you can do now. Well, you're not going to do it now, but I'm going to give you an exercise that you can do that will help you figure out what is your purpose, your vision, your dreams, your why, okay? Now, so here's what I did, because I was struggling with it, and I was trying to figure out, okay, like, so I don't know, I felt like, okay, I don't know what it is. Like, yes, okay, family. Well, yeah, that's my why. But even still, like I said, just saying family, I don't think is enough. So what I did is I got a journal, and I opened up that journal, and I wrote at the top of the page, I wrote down this. What is my purpose? Okay? So I wrote down at the top of the journal, what is my purpose? Now, here's the secret to get to this. The next thing you do after you write down what is my purpose, I'll put a question mark there. So I wrote down what is my purpose. As soon as I wrote that down, the next thing you want to do is write down every single thought that comes into your head after that. So it does not matter what the thought is, you write it down. So you're just going to say to yourself, write it on a piece of paper, what is my purpose? And then you just start to write every single thought that comes into your head. Now, what you're going to notice, though, as you do that, is you're going to go, what is my purpose? And then you're going to start to write some stuff down, whatever comes. And again, just literally every single thing that pops into your head, I want you to write it down. So if you have the thought, as soon as you write, what is my purpose? If the thought comes into your head is, Russ is stupid for telling me to do this, then you should write down, Russ is stupid for telling me to do this. Like literally write every single thing that comes into your head. I don't care what it is. If the thought, and you're going to have stuff like this, you're going to go, what is my purpose? And you might start to write some stuff, and then you're going to go have this thought of like, oh, I should go do the dishes. Then stop and write down, I should go do the dishes. Like literally. Hopefully I'm emphasizing this enough. Every single thought that pops into your head, when you say, what is my purpose, you're going to write it down. Now, as soon as you have the thought, though, of like, oh, I need to go do the dishes, or I should go mow the lawn, or whatever. Whatever the thought is, if it's taking you off of writing for what is my purpose, stop and then just ask yourself again, and you might even write it down again, what is my purpose? So you're going to have to keep bringing yourself back to what is my purpose, okay? Because you're going to write stuff down, you're going to start to think about, oh, I need to remember to call that person. Which, when you have that thought, write it down. Like literally, write every single thought that comes into your head down. But you're going to keep writing. And just, what is my purpose? And then write. What is my purpose? And keep writing. And every time you get off track, come back to what is my purpose? And then keep writing. Now, what should happen is somewhere along the way, you're going to write something down that you're going to then emotionally attach to. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to cry. Like, I'm not, like, you might, but I'm not saying you're going to cry necessarily, but you're going to have something that you write down that you feel like, yeah, that's it. That is what it is. So again, it might be that you write down, what is my purpose? And you write, my family. Okay, great, but why? What is it about your family? What are you trying to accomplish with that? What does that need to look like? And you're just going to write it down. So somewhere along the way, you should have then this feeling of like, I think that's it, like where you're emotionally attached to it. Now, let me tell you about when I did it. So I sat down and I allocated an hour. This was on a Saturday, and I said, okay, I am going to sit down for an hour, and I'm going to write this out. So I sat down, and I was in the office at my house, and I just started to write, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. For an hour, I wrote. And at the end of the hour, I was like, okay, I didn't have anything that like I emotionally felt like, oh, that's it. I landed on what my purpose is. I was actually a little discouraged because I felt like I didn't get there. So I thought, okay, I'm going to stop for now, and I'm going to set aside another time. So this was on a Saturday. And so the next Saturday, so I kind of went a whole week kind of thinking about it. But then I was like, okay, the next Saturday, I was like, okay, I'm going to devote another hour where I'm going to sit down and I'm going to start with what is my purpose, and I'm just going to write. So I sat down and I just started to write, what is my purpose? And I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote for another hour. And at the end of the hour, I was like, I still got nothing. I got nothing. And I was frustrated because I was like, okay, this should work. Why is it not working? And so then this thought popped into my head. And in fact, I need to go back and find where I have this written, because I'll bet you I wrote down, go back and read everything, because this thought popped into my head is, go back and read everything that you wrote for the last 2 hours. So it was, the last Saturday and this Saturday, but go back to that 2 hours of time that I spent writing and just read everything. So I went back and I started to read, and I read, and I read, and I read, and as I was reading through everything, I started to notice a theme. So for me, while I was writing, I never had anything where I was like, oh, it sunk down into here and I felt it, But as I read through, I started to notice this theme over and over and over again. And I was like, I think that's it. Everything that I'm writing down, and by the way, what it was that I figured out as I was writing it down was my purpose is to help other people become successful. And that's what I finally landed on. Is I'm like, my purpose in life is to help other people to accomplish what it is that they want to do and to help them figure out kind of these secret codes of life is basically what I noticed when I went through and read everything that I had written down. I kept noticing this common theme that it was about, I want to help other people become successful. So here's what I found, and what I will tell you is what I have found is typically when you land on what your purpose is, you're going to figure out that it's something deeper than just about you. It's going to be about something outside of yourself, and it's probably going to be about helping other people. So I don't know how much you guys pay attention or listen to Tony Robbins, but if you look at Tony Robbins, like one of the key things that he will talk about over and over and over again is a time at Thanksgiving where somebody showed up to his house because they were really poor to give food to them, a Thanksgiving dinner. And that his dad basically threw the person out and was like, we don't take charity. We're not accepting that stuff from you. And yet now what Tony's mission is to feed like 10 billion people. I can't remember the exact number now, but I know it's over 1 billion is what he's trying to do, is to feed. See, that's the idea of like, what is your purpose? And you are going to find it is something outside of yourself. So yes, it might be your family, but what specifically is that about that you're supposed to do with or for your family? And when you figure that out, and here's why actually, let me explain why this is so important, why it's so crucial, is as probably looking at who's on the screen that I know, and Alicia here in the room, here's what I know, and just my years of training. Here's what I know, is when it comes time to doing real estate, like I say, I'll give you my background, and later today I'm going to tell you a little bit this story in deeper. But as I think about it, I remembered kind of looking at real estate and going, holy cow, like you can make a lot of money from selling houses if you do that. So I went to my uncle and just had asked him, he was a builder, and I said, what do you think about getting into real estate? And remember, this is 30 years ago, or more than 30 years ago, and he said, well, I've got 4 agents that sit my model homes. I paid 2 of them over $60,000, and the other 2 I paid over $100,000. Well, this is over 30 years ago, and so even $60,000 was a great number, but I was like, $100,000 for sure. Well, almost every person, in fact, if I were to have you guys tell me what's your goal in real estate, most of the time, the majority of the time, the number people tell me is 100,000. Even still, 30 years later, it's still the most common number I hear is, oh, make over $100,000 a year. Well, then yet, real estate, from the outside looking in, I would guess, at least for me, but I would assume for you guys too, you looked at real estate and decided to come into real estate because you were like, holy cow, like you go sell $1 million house and you could get paid a $30,000 commission. Like I don't have to do very many of those, and I'm making $100,000 a year. And so that's what people come into real estate. Yet, there was a study that, and there's debate on if this was actually a true study or not, that came out recently that said across the country, 71% of all real estate agents did 0 transactions last year. So it's interesting that you stop and go, okay, 71% of the agents out there in the country did 0 transactions, yet we have the ability to make all of this money. And so why doesn't it happen? Well, the reason it doesn't happen is tied partially back to this. See, most agents think, well, I want to go make $100,000, But when it comes time to actually pick up the phone and start to call people you don't know, or go knock on people's doors and talk to people that you don't know, immediately what shows up? Fear, right? It shows up the okay, and why? What are you fearful of? Alicia, you're going to get picked on a lot until we get somebody else to show up in the room.
Having somebody slam the phone down on you.
Okay, having somebody slam the phone down on you, or slam the door on you, right? Or yell at you and hang up. But here's what I actually have found more than that. If you stopped and looked at it this way and said, okay, real estate consists of, one is prospecting, two is presenting, and number three is closing. Like really, if you stop and simplified this a bit, what you would land on is we gotta prospect, we gotta talk to people, we gotta then meet with people and give them some type of a presentation, and then we gotta close and get them to sign the paperwork. I mean, really, if you look at it, that's what real estate is. But now let's go back to where we started this whole thing. In real estate school, did they teach you how to prospect? No. Did they teach you how to present? No. Did they teach you how to close? No. They taught you how to pass the test. Then you get thrown into real estate, and by the way, I always think this is hilarious, that in the state of Utah, they will give you a real estate license if you can go pass the test. But in order to get your license to cut people's hair, you have to go to school, and then you actually have to do so many hours of actually cutting people's hair before they will give you a license. Yet in real estate, you go pass the test, here you go ahead, you can go help people. And nobody teaches you really how to do this, okay? So which I always think that's kind of funny, because if you screw up somebody's haircut, like that's 6 weeks and it's fixed, basically. I mean, it could be worse, obviously, but you get the point. Like 6 weeks, it's fixed. You screw up somebody's real estate transaction, like we have a lawsuit going on right now. In fact, it's been going on for 6 years, but it's probably going to come to an end, well, unless we appeal, which we probably will. But 6 years that could cost us $2 million. And by the way, it is something that the agent, in my opinion, should not have messed up on. Like it should have been a simple thing that you actually were taught in real estate school. So it doesn't even have anything to do with this. Yet, we'll just go give somebody a license that again, if they would have had somebody over their shoulder watching a little bit, wouldn't have done. And by the way, it wasn't a new agent. But, so let me ask you though real quick. Of these three things, prospecting, presenting, and closing, of those three, and I would love to hear from you guys on Zoom too. So unmute if you can and answer my question, and so that Alicia doesn't feel like she has to answer every question, although I'll let you answer too. Which one of those is most important? Prospecting, presenting, or closing? Prospect. So Alicia's saying prospecting. What about the rest of you guys? This is where we find out if they're really paying attention or not. This one you can throw in the chat box if you can unmute or something. I'm just curious, which one do you guys think? Prospecting, presenting, or closing? Let's see if we can see anything there. All right. Yes, none of the people on Zoom are paying attention. I guess it's just me and you. Okay, I'll give you guys the answer then, since nobody's unmuting. The answer to this, which one is the most important? See, usually, and I was hoping you guys would answer, is some people will say prospecting, some people will say presenting, but most people will say closing or prospecting. Those two tend to be the ones that people say the most. But in actuality, in my opinion, the most important one is presenting. And here's why. The reason I have found most agents don't get on the phone and make calls is because they're like, well, I think more people, even though Alicia said, and maybe I think this because I feel like it was me, but I feel like more people don't get on the phone and make calls, not because people are going to tell them no, but they're more afraid of what am I going to do when somebody tells me yes. If somebody says yes, I don't know how to fill out all the paperwork. I don't know the listing presentation. I don't know the buyer presentation. I don't know all of the stuff because again, in real estate school, they didn't really teach you how to go do all this stuff. So my belief is that the reason most people don't make prospecting calls is because they're afraid of when I get an appointment, I don't know or I don't trust myself to know that I know what I need to do once I get that appointment. Now, the reason I think it's a bit above closing is because you're gonna see when I take you through the listing presentation that I'm gonna show you guys tomorrow and the buyer presentation on Thursday morning, when you see that and I take you through it, what you're gonna find is that closing is actually very simple. It becomes a natural ending to a good presentation. If you do the presentation right, when it comes time to close, the people who you did the presentation for should be actually just saying to you, so what do we need to do to get started? See, that makes that easy. So that's why, in my opinion, the most important thing you can do in your real estate career is get good at your presentation. Because if you're good at your presentation, you will not be afraid to get on the phone and make phone calls. You won't be afraid to talk to people, and the closing is easy because when you do the presentation the right way, at the end, they're just saying to you, so what do we need to do to get started? It's not a sales gimmicky technique either, by the way. It's actually focusing on the other person and figuring out what's important to them is what you're gonna find. All right, so somehow I got pretty far off track there a little bit from this purpose. So, and how I got there, by the way, is this. See, most people are so focused on the how do I go make the money instead of first identifying like, okay, let's say I go make a ton of money. What is it that's going to drive me? And that's how I got off on this whole prospecting tangent thing, is because when it comes time to getting on and making the phone calls, logically, or your emotions kick in, the fear kicks in of, okay, but like people might yell at me, people might hang up on me. And so the importance of having this purpose, this vision or your dreams or your why, is when you have that in place, you don't care. I don't care if somebody yells at me. I don't care if they hang up on me because I have somewhere I'm heading to. So let me give you a quick story on that. Is I took over, so before coming to Century 21 Everest, I was a Coldwell Banker. And I started my career at Coldwell Banker. And when I started, there were, in Salt Lake County at that time, there were three major players in the real estate game. Three companies that were the major players. And it was Coldwell Banker, Wardley Better Homes and Gardens, and Mansell and Associates were the three biggest players. Well, Coldwell Banker was owned by someone locally here, but Coldwell Banker National came in and bought up all three of those companies. So they bought Coldwell Banker, Wardley Better Homes and Gardens, and Mansell and Associates and merged them into one company. And when that merger happened, there were about 3,000 real estate agents in this company. Now, by the next day, and this probably isn't exactly right, but by the next day, that number went from 3,000 agents down to about 1,500 because you had, back then, all of these three major players, like, they didn't really like each other too much. Like, those were kind of all the competitors against each other. And so all of a sudden now you've got three of them that come together, and when they identified who was going to be the president of that company, who was one of the owners of one of the companies, the other two companies' agents were like not happy with it, and so like I say, a bunch of them left, and they all became Coldwell Banker at that time too, which made a lot of people not happy. They didn't like that. So all of these people start leaving. Well, just so you guys know, the way I tell you all this is the way that a merger happens with a real estate company is the challenge with buying a real estate company is all of the assets of that business have legs, meaning they can walk out. They can just say, like, hey, I'm not working here anymore. Just like I told you, they went from 3,000 agents to like 1,500 overnight because 1,500 of the agents were like, I'm not working for either that person or that company. And so they left. And so what typically happens when you purchase a real estate company is you get some money up front, but really where your payout is going to come is based on how many agents stick around and stay with the company. Because again, if every agent, like any of the real estate companies, I don't care who it is, any real estate company out there today, if every single one of their agents just up and walked out the door and transfers their license, that company is going to go out of business more than likely, unless they have enough capital to withstand and recruit more agents. But if every agent picks up and just leaves, they're going to be out of business. So because of that, the way they usually will do a payout is based on how many agents stay. Well, the reason that with this merger is then all of a sudden there were like, we're going to move this office, but then all the agents would freak out that they were going to move the office. And so they'd be like, never mind, we're not going to move that office. We're going to do this. And then a bunch of agents would be like, if you do that, I'm leaving the company. So they'd be like, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. And during that time was about the time I started getting involved in the training program. And so what happened was this. Was you had three different companies, so you had 3 different training programs, and each person who ran one of those training programs was fighting for my way's the best way. And all 3 of them felt like their way was the best way. So what happened is they kept 3 training programs going on for a while. Well, eventually it went down to 2 training programs, and the 2 were kind of competing with each other as to which one was the best. And eventually what happened is they kind of merged the one into the other, and there was now 1 training program. Well, once that happened and there was now this 1 training program, is about the time I started on just helping. I had gone to the person who was doing the training and just said, hey, I want to help. Because again, part of what I had figured out is part of my purpose is helping people be successful. So I went to the training person and said, hey, I want to get involved. I want to help as well. So I started to help out with it. Well, after a little while of doing that, she came to me one day and she said, hey, I am going to quit. She's like, I'm leaving and I don't want to do it anymore. Now, my belief is that the reason that she did that, looking back on it, at the time I didn't realize this, but looking back on it is, I believe she thought she would leave, I would take over, the training program would fail and fall apart, and that the company would come back to her and say, we need you, what do we have to pay you? Because at the end of the day, she wanted more money, and they had just said, we weren't going to give you more money. And so she was like, fine, I'm just going to quit. And I think she thought I would take over, it would fall apart, and they would go rushing back to her. Now, that might have happened, except for back to this purpose, vision, dreams. So I was meeting with a guy who was a mentor of mine, and this mentor of mine that I was meeting with, at that point I had the 2 real trainers that had the 2 different programs going, each telling me you should do this, the other person telling me you should do it this way, and then I had this mentor telling me I should do it a totally different way. So I had 3 people pulling at me. And I was really struggling on what to do. And one day I was sitting at lunch with the mentor over here by Fashion Place Mall, actually. And we were sitting at lunch and we're talking about it. And he was trying to convince me to do what he thought I should do. And in the midst of that, I told him, I said, I'm frustrated because you're telling me to do it this way. I've got this other person telling me to do it their way, and this other person telling them to do it their way. And I'm struggling because I feel like I'm just kind of going 3 different directions and I'm not really making any progress at all. And he said to me, well, you know what you need to do is you just need to go to those other 2 and tell them, back off. Just let me do it. And I was like, okay. And he said, think of it this way. And so he started to talk to me about this vision. He said, you've got to have a vision of where you're headed to. And then the analogy that he used with me, which is, you may or may not like it, but what he said to me is, imagine that you're a bus driver. Like you're driving a bus. That bus has a destination that it's heading to. That's the reason people will get on and off the bus, is because it's going where they want to go. And he said, you got to know where you're headed. And when you know where you're headed, then you can make stops along the way and let people get on or get off the bus, but if you know where you're headed, it doesn't matter who's going with you or not because you're going there. And he said, so just go and tell them, hey, like, I back off, let me do my thing, and let me go. And the interesting thing is I think he assumed I would go tell the other two people that, which I did. But I also turned to him in that very moment at lunch. I still know exactly where we were at. But I remember saying, okay, well, I will do that. I'm going to go tell them to back off, but I need you to back off too. And the look on his face was like, what? Like, I need to back off? And I was like, yeah. Like, let me figure out where I want this bus to go. And then at that point, I'll take advice from you. But I'm headed to where I want to go, not where you think I should go, not where the other two people think I should go. And the key of that is, for me, I became very clear on my vision of where I wanted to get to with it. And then because of that, I actually went and just started to operate that way. And it freed me significantly, because during that training program that I was doing at that time was very intense. It was a very intense training program. Meaning, I had the agents show up every Monday, and we did accountability, and there were 90 agents. I had 90 agents every week that would show up on a Monday. I would sit down with them and be like, okay, let's talk about where you're headed to. Let's get your goals. And then the next week I'd come back and hold them accountable to it. And part of that holding accountable, again, because I knew where I was headed, I didn't care if, and I don't mean this bad, but I didn't care if they wanted to go where I was going or not. Like, they could get off the bus if they didn't like where I was headed. But it freed me up so much because I now was so clear on where I needed to go and what I needed to do. And it was just a matter of, hey, I got these 90 people and I want to help you get there if you want to go with me. But if you don't want to go with me, then don't come. And that's fine. And it made it easy for me to, when people struggled, to be like, hey, I figured it out. You just aren't wanting to go where I'm going, and that's okay. You don't have to. But that's where I'm headed. See, when you do that, and I apologize, I'm spending so much time on this, but it's so important. When you do that and you understand and you know where you're headed, it doesn't matter if somebody hangs up on you on the phone. You don't care if somebody yells at you and tells you you're an idiot, and real estate agents are lower than used car salesmen, like whatever. Like, you don't care, because you're like, yeah, that's fine. I know where I'm going. I want to help you get your property sold or help you buy a house if that's what you want. But if you don't, that's okay, because I know where I'm going and I'm going to get there. It's just, are you going to go with me? Meaning, let me help you get your property sold. And again, this is not a sales gimmicky thing. It's like, hey, I want to help people. I want to help them accomplish whatever it is they want. Because there are some people who say they want to sell their house, but they don't really want to sell it because they price it to where it's not going to sell, or they won't get the condition, whatever it is. But if you know where you're going, then you just go find people that want to go with you. And if they don't want to go with you, it's okay. So it's not bad if somebody hangs up on you because you just figured out, well, they aren't wanting to go where I'm headed. And that's okay. I'm okay with that. All right. Any questions on purpose, vision, dreams, why? Have I beat that up enough? Alicia's like, what if I decide I don't want to go where you're going and I just want to leave? Just kidding. Hopefully. Okay. All right. Well, feel free again, for you guys on Zoom, if you're really actually there, feel free to unmute and ask questions. Number two on this foundation. So again, back to what we're doing. We're talking about these 6 things that you have to have in place if you want to be successful in real estate. So number 2 is goals, plan, and a schedule. Okay? Now, I'm not going to give it yet, but I have a business plan that I will give to you guys. And for you guys on Zoom, I'm gonna drop it into the chat box so you can download it, so that you can have it. What we're not gonna do is, I'm not gonna go through and tell you how necessarily to fill it out. I'll give it to you for you to fill it out, but I'm gonna give you the basis of how to go fill it out, and then you can sit down and fill out your business plan. But here's where we're going to start on this. So we're going to talk about goals, plan, and schedule. Now, how I want to do this and cover this information is, let me start with it this way, is think of it this way, and I'm going to give you guys throughout the training, I'm going to give you some books that I would recommend to read if you haven't read, that would be good things to read. And at this point, let's talk about one of them is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So Robert Kiyosaki wrote a book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A lot of times, most people have already read it. If you have, great. If you haven't, that's okay. I would recommend you should. But in that book, one of the things he talks about is what he calls the cash flow quadrant, okay? And in the cash flow quadrant, what he says is most people start out as an employee, okay? In this cash flow quadrant, most people start out as an employee. And I don't know about you guys and what brought you into real estate, but I will tell you, for me, part of what brought me into real estate is I was working at a bank. And at that bank, I obviously was an employee. And what I noticed at the bank was I feel like I've always been a hard worker. And I'll tell you a little bit later, like I've always been the type of person that, hey, tell me what to do. Like, in fact, as a teenager, I got a job working at a motorcycle shop that's in West Valley called Plaza Cycle. And because I liked motorcycles, and I was like, I want to go work there. So I got a job working there. And what my job was there was I would show up after school, and I would go get what UPS had dropped off, all the parts. And so I would take all of the parts that had been ordered, open up the boxes, and then I would go put the parts on the shelves there so that the parts department could come and get the parts. So I remember I got there, and I had them train me on how to do the job. And once they had trained me, I would get to work, and I had set hours, and I'd show up there, and I would open the boxes, and I'd go stock the shelves really quick, put all the parts away, put the tires wherever they needed to be, and then I would go to the lady that was my boss and be like, okay, I'm done. What do you want me to do now? And she would be like, why don't you go sweep the floor? Okay. So I'd go sweep the floor, and then when I'm done, I'd come back. Okay, now what should I do? And eventually she was kind of like, slow down a little, like, because I'm not really sure what to tell you to do. So I guess just kind of go look around and see if there's stuff you could clean up. Like, I have just always been the type of person that are like, tell me what to do. So I'm working at a bank, and I was doing that same thing. Well, then what I started to notice when I worked at the bank was I started to notice that I started getting all of these extra jobs, like, and specifically, this was kind of one of the there were two key things that had me leave working at the bank. But one of them was, I worked out in the operations department. And one of them was, my manager came to me one day and said, hey, I got a project for you. And I said, okay. And he told me what the project was. And I was like, wait, why are you having me do that project? That's like not even, I was managing a department at that time. And I was like, that's not even my department. Like, why are you having me do that? That's this other lady's. And he was like, well, I just know you'll get it done, and I'm not sure how long it would take her to get it done. And so I just feel like you'll get it done quicker than she will, so I want you to do it. And I remember thinking, well, wait a minute. Like, the way that it worked at the bank is each position you had a certain pay scale, like from here to here. And because I was young and new, I was on the bottom end of the pay scale. And because she had been at the bank for a long time, she was at the top end. And I was like, wait a minute, like, she's at the top end of the pay scale, I'm at the bottom, but I'm going to do her job? And I remember thinking, like, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to go do something that I get rewarded for how hard I work. So I was looking at it, and part of keeping in mind, as an employee, you get told what to do, what time to show up, when to leave, they're going to tell you what they're going to pay you, all that kind of stuff. And generally, you don't have a whole lot of control over your income there. A little bit, but not a whole lot. So I remember thinking, well, I want to go do something, because I believed I was a hard worker. So I thought, I want to go do something that the harder I work, the more money I'll make. Well, that leads us to number 2 on this cash flow quadrant, and that is self-employed, is what Robert Kiyosaki talks about. And people who are self-employed, basically you're going to go work and you get paid whatever it is you're doing. So I remember saying, okay, I want to quit being an employee and I want to go be self-employed. And I remember when I went to my boss at the bank and said, hey, I'm giving you my notice, I'm going to go do real estate. And she told me about another, one of the directors there that she said, oh, he went and tried to do that and he just didn't make any money. So you should go talk to him. So I went and talked to him and he was like, oh yeah. But he was trying to do it while he was working a full-time job and do real estate and it just didn't work. And so I was already decided I'm quitting and just gonna go full-time into real estate. So I quit and went and did it. And I'm grateful I did. But here's what I want to talk about is self-employed, it means you only make money when you work, right? That's what being self-employed looks like. Well, the next area of the cash flow quadrant that he talks about is called business owner. Okay? And let me ask actually, what is the difference between being a self-employed person and being a business owner? And I generally get the same answer for this all the time, which I always think is interesting. But what's the difference between being a business owner and self-employed?
I guess a business owner has employees.
That's the answer I usually get. That's generally the answer I get is a business owner has employees and self-employed don't. Which I think is interesting that is the way that our brain works. Is we think self-employed means you're by yourself, business owner means you have employees.
I think a business owner can be by themselves.
But you're exactly right. If every person who is self-employed typically owns a business. So why do we distinguish a business owner and self-employed? Any thoughts?
Systems in place.
Good, yes. That's part of where I'm going, it's the systems and things. So here's the key thing. I don't know what you guys are thinking, like when you came to real estate, if you thought, well, I'm gonna go be self-employed, but from today forward, do not ever think of yourself as self-employed, you're a business owner. From today forward, you are a business owner. And here's part of the difference. So right out of high school, I did construction for about a year. So I graduated from high school when I was 17. I was one of the young kids in class. And right after high school, I just decided I was going to do construction for a year. And during that time, I worked actually doing construction for two different guys. One of them, I will tell you, was self-employed. The other one, I would tell you, is a business owner. And the interesting thing is, I worked for both of them doing essentially the same thing. Like I was their helper. They would get jobs, like to go build a garage for somebody or to finish the basement, whatever it was, that I worked for these guys. And one of them, though, was self-employed. The other, I would say, was a business owner. And here's what I noticed the difference was. The guy who I would tell you was self-employed, if I look now at where he is at financially, and I'm not saying that this is the case for everybody, but I would say for him, he is a self-employed person, meaning he didn't have a business plan. He never had any vision of like, hey, where am I wanting to take this business to? What am I wanting to accomplish with this business? He was just more of like, hey, where's the next job? What's the next job I'm gonna get? And in fact, the reason I left working with that guy was we had completed a job, and at the end of that job, he goes, hey, it was winter, and he's like, I don't have any other jobs. So you might wanna go find a new job because I don't know when the next job's gonna show up. That to me is what self-employed looks like, is well, I don't have a plan. I'm not doing anything to like know where I'm taking this. Like it's back to this purpose vision. Like he didn't have a vision of where he's going. It was just, hey, when somebody calls me, which by the way, a lot of real estate agents operate that way. Well, when somebody calls me, I'll go list their house. Like we had a guy actually in my first office that I can't even remember the guy's name, but I just called him the thinker because every day, so you guys that are on Zoom can't see this room necessarily. Some of you might know it, but there's just a bank of windows, like all windows here and all windows here. And my first office was like that, only the windows were even taller. But he would show up, and it was out on Redwood Road in West Jordan. And that guy would show up, and he would sit down at his desk, and he was looking out, like at the windows out at Redwood Road, and no lie, he would just sit there like this for hours. For hours, he'd just be sitting there staring out the window, and after sitting there staring out the window for hours, he'd then get up, leave, and go home. And every day I'd be like, what is that guy doing? Like, because he literally did nothing. And I finally asked him one day, what are you doing? He's like, I'm waiting for the phone to ring. And I was like, oh, okay. I don't think he ever did a deal, because he just sat there waiting for the next deal to show up, and it never showed up. Like, for hours, he would just sit there, stare out the window, and just watch cars drive by. So that's what self-employed looks like. So I want to make sure that you guys know from today forward, you are not self-employed, you're a business owner. Now, so what's the difference of that? Well, in my mind, a business owner actually has goals, they have a plan, and they have and put together a schedule of what they are wanting to accomplish. So they know what they're doing. The example I love to use on this is outside of my window over here is Chick-fil-A. I love using the example of Chick-fil-A. Like, they know what their business plan is. They have a schedule. Like, when it comes to schedule, and we'll talk more about schedule in a minute, but when it comes to schedule, like, they know what their schedule is. So some of you might know this, most of you don't, but my middle son is in Chick-fil-A's leadership development program. So he actually is in California right now, about to transition one of the Chick-fil-A's in California from being run by an owner-operator to what my son's doing right now, which he's trying to earn his way to become an owner-operator. But this operator has had some health issues, and so Chick-fil-A corporate is taking over. So my son is going in to that Chick-fil-A to take over for this owner-operator until Chick-fil-A identifies a new owner-operator for them, and then they'll come in and he'll go somewhere else. Well, one of the things that my son said, there are 3 things that cause somebody to, if you're an operator and Chick-fil-A comes to you and says, we're taking it away from you, there's 3 things that will cause that to happen. One of them is, obviously, if you steal money from them, you're gonna lose. The other one is, the 3 S's is, so stealing. The other one is sex. So having sex with an employee or something is, you're gonna lose your franchise. And then the last one is selling chicken on Sunday. So as you all know, Chick-fil-A is closed on Sunday. And one of the things that they will come in and say, you're losing being an operator, is if you sell chicken on Sunday. Like, they are so against, they know that's part of their plan. So you need to have that same type of a thing, and same thing with schedule, and I'll say more about that in a minute. But back to business owner, that's what makes somebody a business owner, is they have goals, they have a plan of where they want to get to, and then they also have, hey, this is what my schedule is going to look like. So I'm going to give to you guys here in a little bit a business plan that you should fill out. And you should fill it out for yourself. Now, before you do that, and why I'm not giving it to you yet, is I'm first going to go through some more stuff on this of how to do it. How do you fill it out? But before we do that, I want to finish off this cash flow quadrant. The last area that he talks about is investor in this cash flow quadrant. See, most people become an employee, they then usually go to self-employed, become a business owner, and investor. Now, again, back to, usually when I ask the question, people will say a business owner has employees. Well, a self-employed person can too, and a business owner really is self-employed. Like, to me, the difference between these two is, do you have goals, plan, and a schedule? Are you operating it with systems and things that you're going to do? Now, the last thing that I want to hit on with this, though, is keep in mind, part of your objective is from today forward, you're a business owner. What I want you to also think about, though, is part of what I'm going to do is become an investor. See, part of what I want you to be doing is thinking about how do I move from being the business owner to the investor. Because what's the difference between a business owner and an investor?
The investor isn't doing the actual work.
The investor's doing the work?
It's not.
Oh, yeah, good. I was going to say, so
Not.
business owner is involved in the day-to-day operations. An investor is not. An investor is, hey, I'm checking up on, and I like to say, think of it this way, is you got all of your money becomes these little soldiers that you send out to go do work and then bring back a bunch of friends with them. That's what I want you to think about is as we put together this goals, plan, and schedule, you're going to see here in a minute, I want you to be thinking about how do I go from being the business owner to becoming the investor. And if you'll do that, along with having this clear vision of where you're going, it is going to help you be way more successful and getting where you want to go. All right. So next piece of this then. All right. So now, again, we're talking about goals, plan, and schedule. So I'm going to talk about business plan and how you should put it together. Now, if I were to ask, and so far asking for the people who are on Zoom has failed. Not on, but whatever. You guys just haven't answered me, and that's fine. But if I were to ask everyone here, what is your goal in terms of your income for 2026? I already mentioned the most common answer that I would get from you guys is going to be 100,000. Now, but even if it's not, even if it's 250 or 500,000, whatever that number is, or 60,000, I don't care. Here's the problem with that. Here's what I have found is most people have kind of these thresholds that they are setting their goals for. So when I say to somebody, how much money do you want to make? Most of the time what people will do is they'll tell me a number, but it's usually based on, and there's nothing wrong with this, by the way, other than there's a better way. So it's not bad, it's just there's a better way. Is generally the way people do it, and this kind of makes sense, is that they say, okay, well, this is how much I've made, and so I want to make this. So sometimes I will have people come in and say, well, I just need to make 60,000. Or somebody else may come in and they say, well, I want to hit 100,000, which, as I said, that's the most common number I always hear is I want to make 100,000. And that's fine. But the people who have made 100,000 usually are like 200, or I want to make 250, and then 300, and then usually it's to 500, and then from 500 it's to $1 million, which is great. That's totally fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's a better way. There's a better way to do it, and that's what I want to show you now. So when you're setting your income goal, here's how I want you to do this, okay? Rather than just throwing out a number, because again, hopefully what you're seeing here is what I'm trying to get you guys to see is when it comes to being successful in real estate, and again, for me, I always am like, and I hope you guys are okay with what I'm going through, but I'm always worried that people are sitting there going, hey, well, so yeah, but when are you going to get to how do I call somebody and be successful on the phone or knock on their door and be successful? And I'm going to do that. Like, that's why I told you what our schedule is going to look like. I'm going to give you this afternoon, how do you do that? And I'm going to give you tomorrow of like, how do you do the listing presentation along with more of the lead generation. But I first want to make sure, you first got to know where you're headed. Then we got to have goals to get there. We got to have the behind the goal why. What's the why behind it? So here's what you need to do, or here's how I want you to do it, is when you're setting your business plan, the first thing I want you to do is I want you to stop and say, okay, how much money do I need monthly? Okay? So just how much money do I need on a monthly basis just to cover my bills? So like whatever it is, your cell phone plan, your whatever streaming services, rent, food, utilities, all of that kind of stuff, I want you to stop and first just fill out, okay, what's that number look like? How much money do I need, okay? And I need a drink of water. Which we'll take a break here and just as soon as I finish off this, we'll take a break for a minute and then we'll come back, go till about noon and stop for lunch. Okay. So first thing you want to identify is just how much money do I need on a monthly basis. Once you have identified that, the next thing that I want you to do is to say, okay, how much money do I need if, and you may not have this, so some this may apply to, some may not, but how much money do I want to put aside this year to eliminate some debt? So if you have any debt, car payment, student loans, credit cards, furniture stores, anything that way, just any debt, if you have any, house pay, your mortgage payment, whatever it is, how much money do you want to use this year to eliminate? How much debt do you want to eliminate? So you're gonna then write down a number of how much debt, 10,000, 20, 100, whatever it is. Write down, if you can go sell real estate and make a good living, whatever that is, and we'll find out in a second, but how much debt do you want to eliminate this year? Now, if you have a huge number, you might not write down the entire number, but whatever it is, just decide how much do I want to eliminate. Is there a credit card or student loan, something like that, okay? Then I want you to stop and say, okay, what things, so this next thing is things that you want to buy. So what things do you want to buy? Do you have, which by the way, like my wife and I went through this exercise just last week, Friday I think it was actually. We went through this exercise and we identified, okay, this next year, what are some things that we want to do and buy? And like she wants to do some remodeling on the house and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, we identified, okay, what are the things that we want to purchase this next year? And then you're gonna write that down, okay? But before we move on from this, let me actually take it one step further of what I want you to do. Is what I want you to do on this, and again, my wife and I, well, I'll talk about it's one of the next things, is I'll get to the specifics on that. But here's what I want you to do. Let's say that you're wanting to buy a new car. If you have a new car that you want to buy this year, rather than just say new car, what I want you to do is actually go to the car dealership or go online and build the car that you want. I want you to go get the features. I want you to go figure out, so if you go to the car dealership, figure out the vehicle, figure out the features that you want it to have, like, and then from there, the color, everything. And how much is it gonna be? And then you're gonna write down that dollar amount right there, okay? So for the car. So you're gonna list each thing that you wanna buy. If you wanted to buy a brand new set of golf clubs, go figure out, like, hey, I wanna get these custom made golf clubs. Great. How much are they gonna cost to get it? And then you're gonna write down, $1,200 or whatever it is, $1,285. If it's, which by the way, if it's $1,285, write down, don't write $1,300, write $1,285. Write the exact amount that's gonna cost, okay? So you're gonna figure out what things you want. Now, so let me pause here for a minute. You hear a lot of people talk about creating a vision board. In essence, that's what you're doing with this, is you're gonna create a vision board, but here's the difference. Rather than just finding a magazine or go finding a picture of a car, like go actually to the dealership, go stand in front of the car that you wanna buy, have somebody take a picture of you in front of the car, and I get it might not be the car, but the exact model, features, all that you want, then put that on your vision board. So it's you standing in front of it, not some other person out of a magazine that really doesn't mean anything. So hopefully you're seeing this theme of what I'm doing is you want to go have that, like, you're going to go figure it out, sit in it, drive it, all that kind of stuff, get a picture of you in it, then put that on your vision board as that's the car I want. Okay? There's going to be some emotion behind it. So same thing with the golf clubs or a new phone or a TV, whatever it is you're doing, figure out exactly what you want and then put it there and put the exact dollar amount that it's going to cost to be there, because every one of these dollars means something. Okay, next. Next thing you're going to do is what vacations or / trips are you going to go on this year? Now, this is where slight joke for you. Do you know what the difference between a trip and a vacation is? Any ideas?
A trip could be for work.
Okay, good. So trip could be for work. That's a good point. But here's how I like to think of it. On a trip, you take your kids with you. On a vacation, you don't. It's a vacation when your kids don't go. So, and totally kidding, but that's how, truly, that is how my wife and I think about it, is for us, if we're gonna go somewhere with the kids, or now for me, I have 2 grandkids, but with the grandkids, it's a trip. If we're gonna go just her and I, it's a vacation. And so sometimes I will tell her, hey, we've done all these trips, it's time for us to do a vacation. We need to go somewhere just to it. So same thing on this though. Once you plan your trips and your vacations, what you're gonna do is you're gonna say, okay, let's figure out where we're gonna go, how we're gonna get there. Are we flying, driving, taking the train, like what, and how much is it gonna cost? So what is the airfare going to be? So again, my wife and I just did this last, over the weekend on, it might have even been Thursday. I can't remember, Thursday or Friday we did. But we sat down and we started looking at, okay, because one of my boys with his son, his wife and my granddaughter is, they're gonna go to Disney World in Florida at the end of the year, and they said, you guys are welcome to come if you want. And so my wife's like, yep, we're going with them. So we sat down and we figured out, okay, how much is the airfare gonna be? And granted, it might end up being slightly different when we actually book the trip, but we figured out, how much is it gonna cost? What hotel are we gonna stay at? And how much are the park tickets? And how much are we gonna need for food and that kind of stuff? You know, a rental car, all of those things. What you're gonna do is, in essence, I want you to think of it as you're planning the vacation and then figuring out how much is that gonna be, and then you're gonna write it down here. So trips and vacations is the next thing. Figure out what trips and vacations you wanna go on in the next year, actually plan them so that you know how much it's gonna cost, then you're gonna write that down, okay? Real quick story on this. About 10 years ago now, I was teaching this class, and I went through everything we're talking about on this so far. And as we went through it, I had this lady in the class that raised her hand, and she said, so it was when I brought up my little joke, which so now you know I've been telling it for at least 10 years, my little joke of, you know what the difference between a vacation and a trip is? And I said that, you know, the trip you take your kids, a vacation you don't. I made that joke, and she raised her hand and she said, do you know, I have never once taken my kids on, she said vacation. In my mind, that would be a trip. But she said, I've never taken my kids on a vacation. And I was like, what do you mean? And she said, I have been a stay-at-home mom for the last, I don't remember how many years, 25 years, something like that. And she said, we just couldn't afford to ever take our kids, and like we went camping. That was our vacations. She's like, I never took my kids and went to Disneyland or anything like that. And I was like, okay, well, here's what I want you to do then. So I told her, I said, go plan it. I said, figure out, you want to take your kids? How many grandkids do you have? She told me the number, I don't remember. I said, are you going to pay for them to go to? Yes, I want to. Great. I said, so figure out, how much is it going to cost? And at the time, when we were sitting there, she said to Disneyland, she wanted to take them. And she said, or I told her, go figure out, how much is it gonna cost? Are you gonna drive? Are they gonna drive? Are they gonna fly? You decide. Are you paying for their hotel? Are they paying for their hotel? Are you paying for their food? Are they paying for their food? Are you paying for their park tickets? Who's, you know, figure it out. She said, I wanna pay for basically everything. I don't think she really meant everything, but she said, I basically wanna pay for everything because I'd never taken them on any type of a trip. We only went camping. And I said, great, here's what you're gonna do then. Go plan it. Go plan the trip. Figure out exactly how much it's gonna cost. Write it down. Okay? So same thing I told you guys. Now, fast forward about a little over a year after that. Now, by the way, if you would have asked me when she was sitting in the training, one of the things I have learned by training for the last 20 years is you cannot tell the difference between who's going to be successful and who's not going to be successful in real estate. I have learned that. Like, there are people that walk into a training and I'm like, holy cow, they got it all going on and they fail at real estate. And I got other people that come in that I'm like, you'll never survive, and then they go out and thrive in real estate. So I've learned you can never guess. But if you would have made me guess the day she was sitting there, I would have said unlikely that she's successful in real estate. Now, fast forward a year, a little over a year. Fast forward a little over a year, we were at a company meeting, and at this company meeting, we had all of our agents come together. And we're at this meeting, and she walks up to me and she says, Russ, I don't know if you remember me, but my name is, and she told me her name. And I said, yeah, of course I remember you. You know, I remember you being in the training. And she said, well, do you remember when you went through and you talked about write down how much you need monthly, write down how much your dad's, you know, she said, and you got to the vacations part, and I said I had never taken my kids anywhere. And I said, yeah, I remember. And she said, I am here, which, by the way, I love this. So if this ever happens to you, please tell me. But she said, I'm coming back to report what happened. And I love it. Because again, back to, for me, you go back to what my purpose is. My purpose is to help people be successful. She comes to me and says, I just wanted to report back to you that I just got back within a month or two. She said, I just got back from taking my whole family on a trip to Disney World. So she had told me in the class a year before she wanted to take them to Disneyland. She said, I ended up taking them all to Disney World because she said, in the last year, I made $120,000 from real estate. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. Yeah, like I'm so excited when somebody comes and shares with me, hey, here's what I did, and it worked. But again, back to if you would have asked me the first day her sitting in class if she would do it, again, my answer now is always, I don't know. Like I've just learned you can't tell. But 10 years ago, if you would have asked me, I would have been like, I don't know. We'll see. You know, if she'll go do it, she'll do it. And you know what? She did. But so her purpose was big enough that she went out, she made $120,000 her first year in real estate. And I will tell you, I think it's a key piece of that is you got to identify what, by you figuring these things out, planning the trip, planning the things you want to buy, gets you back to this bigger vision of what it is that you're wanting to accomplish. So make sure you don't just hear what I'm saying, but actually go do this. And like I said, my wife and I, this past week, we sat down and we started going through all this and figuring out. And in fact, actually, this kind of bothered me, if I'm honest. So don't anybody share this with my wife. But after we got done doing our planning session, my wife wrote it all down. And then she came to me and she was like, okay, let's both sign this. That's what we're doing. And I was like, which I think the reason it bothered me, it shouldn't bother me, but I think the reason it bothered me is because my youngest son, who is 17, like anytime we have any conversation with him, we're like, okay, we're going to write it down and have you sign it because he has this way of, I never agreed to that. I never said that. So when my wife came and was like, let's both sign this, I was kind of like, do you think I'm Mason? Like I'm going to come back later on and be like, I never agreed to that. I'm like, I'm not going to do that, but I signed it anyway. So just so you know. But and it really was a good idea for us to both sign it because we both were committing to, yeah, we're going to do this. We're going to make it happen. So, which we've done this planning this way, but we've never actually, I'm going to have to ask her, what was the reason for you saying, let's sign it? But, because again, we've done it this way, but whatever. Anyway, we're not done, okay? So, here's what I would say though. So once you've done that, what you're going to do is you're going to total that up, okay? And when you total that up, you're going to come up with a number. And what I'm going to tell you right now is that number should be 70% of what your goal number that you're going to write down on this business plan of how much money you want to make is doing this equates to 70%. Okay? So now that you've landed on that, what you're going to do then is you're going to take and figure out, because so where's the other 30% that I'm going to? Because this is only 70% of my goal. So once I've figured that out, I've landed on here's my goal for 70%. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to figure out then what is going to be the other 10%. Well, 10% of that is going to then, you need to identify, at which, by the way, this next piece, what I'm giving you, or from here on, this 70% on, comes out of another book. The book is written, the author of the book is Og Mandino, OG, so he's the real OG, I guess, but Og Mandino, and the name of the book is The Richest Man in Babylon, okay? And I actually have read it in the book, but then I also heard this from Jim Rohn, not Jim Rome, Jim Rohn, R-O-H-N. Jim Rohn was Tony Robbins' mentor. But so I actually first read this and heard it from Jim Rohn, but then I also read it in the book, The Richest Man in Babylon. And what they say is you should donate 10% of your income to a charity. So you identify, I don't care what it is, United Way, food bank, I don't care. You figure out a church, whatever it is. Figure out though, because you should give 10% back to some type of a charity. And the idea behind that is giving back to helping people less fortunate than what you are. So that's where 10% is going to go. The next 10% needs to go to passive savings. So 10% is going to be that you invest to be invested passively. And when I say passively, that means somebody else is managing it. So you're not managing it. You're going to take the money, give it to somebody else to manage. Now, why? Why would we want to do that? Well, here's the reason. The reason you want to do that is ultimately we want to give 10% of what our income is to somebody else to manage. And the idea of that is whether it's a bank, it's a financial institution, insurance, whatever, something like that. But the idea behind that is ultimately is you're giving back to keep the economy, that's your way of participating and helping our economy keep rolling. And if you stop and think about the way that pricing and things work on mortgages, ultimately the more money there is available to be invested, the better the interest rates are going to be versus the less money there is, then the higher the interest rate. So think of it that way too. As part of what you're doing is you're putting money out there that funds can take to then invest in that potentially goes into real estate. It could be going to other things, but ultimately you're kind of helping keep the economy going by investing your money and letting somebody else pass it. You're passively investing in it. So you're giving it to somebody else, they manage it, they invest it, try to grow your money for you, okay? Then the last area, the last 10% is for active investing. The last 10% is active investing. That's you managing it. The way I like to think about this, and especially in real estate, is the longer you're in this business, the more times you're going to run across a really good deal. So ideally for me, I want to be in a position that if I come across somebody who's like, I need to sell my house and I need to sell it tomorrow and I just need X amount of dollars, but that, even though you might tell them let me give you an example. I'll give you a quick example of this. So one of my best friends lives in St. George, calls me up one day and says to me, hey, I'm coming up there to Salt Lake. His dad actually lived in North Salt Lake. He said, but coming up there to meet with my dad because his dad then had cancer. And he said, I'm going to convince my dad that he needs to sell his house, come and move to St. George and live with me. And I'm going to take care of him, because his cancer was going to be terminal. So he said, will you meet me at my dad's house and tell me what we need to do to get it ready to sell and how much you think we could sell it for? I said, yeah, sure. So we show up to the house and we walk through the house and I'm making a list of hey, needs to fix this, needs to fix that, you got to do this, you got to do that. I'll give you an example of one of the things was, and the home was built prior to 1978 and there was cracked and peeling paint on the exterior. And so I was like, hey, that's something you're going to want to get done because an appraiser is going to show up and because it's prior to 1978, they're going to say, hey, might be lead-based paint. So you're going to want to get that fixed. It was a flat roof. I said, when was the last time your dad had the roof done? He said, I have no idea. I'm sure it's been a long time. I'm like, well, my experience is if it's been a long time, they're going to want the roof redone. So I would recommend just getting the roof redone now. So I have this whole list of things of need to fix this, need to fix that, get that done, get this done. And then at the end of that, I told him, here's what I think the house would sell for. If you go do all this stuff, I think it would probably sell for this. And while we were talking, he said, man, the problem with all of that is I'm going to be the one that has to do the work, my friend from St. George. And he's like, and I got to drive 4 hours up here to come paint and scrape and do all that kind of stuff, and I'm gonna have to oversee getting the roof done. He's like, you know, if somebody would just give my dad, and I had already told him what I thought the house could sell for. And he said, if somebody would just give my dad X amount of dollars, like, and then he doesn't have to worry about it, I don't have to worry about it, I would totally do that. And I said, well, like, you realize though, if you do all this stuff, you could sell it for this amount of money. And my buddy said, well, I get it, but I don't want to deal with it. Like, I understand that could happen, but if we could just get X, my dad would do it. And I said, well, if you're serious, then yeah, let's do it. We can get that done. And so anyway, ended up buying that house, fixing it up and selling it. And that's the idea of this active investing. So again, it's not, I don't ever want to go out and take advantage of somebody. Like, I am always going to tell them, hey, if you do this stuff, you could sell it for this, because that's all that I'm going to do. When I buy it from you, I'm just going to do all this stuff or hire somebody to do it. And then I'm going to turn around and sell it for X. But there are a lot of times that people are just like, I don't want to deal with it. I just want to be done and move on. And just somebody give me X and I'll move on. Had another one that was that way, that the person was just like, I just need $30,000 because I found this mobile home that I want to go buy. I'm going to go pay cash for it. I want out of the house. I just want all the history that's going on in the house gone. So give me X. I can go buy this mobile home. I'll pay cash and I'll just be done. Great. Like, that's the kind of thing that you want to do, which again, if we go back to where we started with this, the employed, self-employed business owner investor, what I'm trying to do with this passive and active investing is help you create a scenario so that down the road, you can just become an investor. We have got a number of agents at our brokerage, one in particular that I'll tell you a quick story on, that he might be 15 years ago now. I was going to say 10, but probably closer to 15 now. 15 years ago, he just decided, I'm going to do this and start investing in properties. And so he's bought properties, either fixes them up and sells them, or fixes them up and keeps them as a rental, and has done that so many times that he has generated enough income that about 4 years ago-ish, he decided, I'm taking my whole family, and for the next year, he pulled his kids out of school and said, rather than them sit in school and hear about history, I'm going to go help them experience it. We are going to go. So he went and bought a motor home, and then for a year took his family with, I think he had 4 kids, and I think all junior high or younger, maybe even in elementary, but threw them into a motor home. They drove the country for a year because he's financially in a position that he doesn't need to work. He's got enough investment properties that he's had over $25,000 a month coming into him just from his investment properties. That's the net. That's what I want for you, is I want to help you create that, and this is how we do it, okay? So with that, we'll take a break here for like 10 minutes here in just a minute. And during that break, so Alicia, I'll give you the business plan. You guys that are on Zoom, I'm going to throw it into the chat box so you can download the business plan. But your assignment is take that business plan first, do this. Once you have gone through and done this, then go through and fill out the business plan. And what's going to happen then is you're going to come down here and you're going to end up with a number that you've totaled up to. When you write down your business plan, that's the goal. Now, what do you think the chances are that when you do this, that you write it down and it's exactly 100,000? Almost zero chance that it's 100,000. It might be $99,986, but it's not going to be 100. It might be 102,500. I don't know. But what I do know is it's not going to be when you do this, it's not going to end up as a round number. And unless you round everything off, which I would recommend don't do. Don't round them off. Get exact numbers, because every one of those dollars means something. And when you write down that number, what's going to happen is now all of a sudden, back to this purpose, vision, why stuff, all of a sudden you're like, okay, I'm excited about this. Like, I've planned all this stuff out. I know exactly if I hit this number, I'm going to be able to do all this stuff, which should motivate you to be like, okay, I got to go get to work and go do it. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay, so let's take like a 10-minute break. So it's 10:43. So we'll start back up at 10:53, and we'll start right back up. And then I'm going to finish off 3, 4, 5, and 6. We'll go faster on these next ones, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then we'll stop at about noon, like I said, for lunch. And then when we come back at 1:30, we're going to get into, okay, now that we've got our business plan and stuff in place and we understand the foundation, now let's get into, okay, how do we be successful and make money in real estate? So, sound good? Okay, 10 minutes, be back 10:53. I'm going to check all my email and see what I got here. I'll throw in some music so hopefully you guys really are there in, oh yeah, good. So Jeff just replied, so thanks. All right, at least one person on Zoom is paying attention. All right, let's see if that fixes it. I still even don't like how wordy it makes this. All right. I'm 1 minute late, sorry. But we're gonna get going here. So, next. Where did my markers go? Okay. So, good to know. Had a couple people send me a text, let me know you really are listening on there. Just didn't answer for whatever reason, which is totally fine. So, okay. So number 2 is goals, plan, and schedule. So we talked about the goal. The way you're going to come up with the goal is you're going to figure out by totaling all of this stuff up. Once you have landed on that number, that's where you're then going to write that down as what your income goal is. And then the next piece of that then is plan. So then from there, you're going to go through and figure out the rest of the business plan. And really from there, once you've landed on that number, then what you're going to do is from there, you should be able to say, okay, based upon that income goal, then how much am I making per transaction that I close? So you should be able to look at what your previous closings, like what's your average sales price been. And if you don't know what your average sales price is, then I would say just take whatever the average sales price is for the area that you're working in and identify what's the average sales price. And you could ask a manager or something if you're not quite sure on that. But what's the average sales price? Then from there, you're going to take that average sales price, divide that into what your goal is in terms of commission. That's going to tell you how many transactions you need to do. And then from how many transactions you need to do, you should there be able to then work backwards to saying, okay, if I got to get, let's just say, to make the numbers easy, I got to get 24 transactions in order to make that income. That means I got to get 2 transactions a month. Well, if I'm going to get 2 transactions a month, I probably need to set appointments to meet with, and again, this is going to vary person to person, but you might say, okay, well then I got to meet with, you got to look at how many appointments do you have to set to actually get a transaction, and let's just say for the sake of it that it's like you get 25% that turn into a transaction, then you would say, okay, well I need 2 per month. Well, that means I got to set 8 appointments in order to get those 2. And in order for me to set 8 appointments, I've got to make X number of calls, then hopefully you have an idea. And if you don't have an idea how many it takes, then just probably I would say, and we'll talk more about this afternoon in the lead generation. I'll help you figure some of that out. But basically, how many contacts do I need to make on each day? And ultimately, though, it really, and I'm going to tell you this afternoon, it's really all boils down to only just how many appointments do you need? And if you need 8 appointments, then bam, now I know what I got to do every month is I need to set 8 appointments or 10 appointments, whatever it is. And I would say more than likely, it's probably more like 20. Well, it depends on your income goal. Somewhere between 10 to 20 is what my guess is you're going to need per month in terms of appointments. But I'll say more about that this afternoon. So next, let's get to schedule real quick. So I'm going to give to you our top agent here at Century 21. Our top agent last year made over $3 million from real estate. And what I'm going to give to you now is what his schedule looks like. So this is what his schedule looks like. And what you're going to be surprised to see is typically when you would say to somebody that an agent's making $3 million, you're probably going to go, holy cow, I don't want to work that hard. Like that, they must work 24/7. And the truth is that is probably not going to be the case for you and for him, what you'll see. So for me, when you're putting together your schedule, here's what you want to do is for your schedule, I believe your schedule starts the night before. So when you're putting together and planning a schedule, you need to start with the night before. Because what I have found is, depending on if you're a morning or a night person, but if you're a night person, night people tend to stay up too late so that they don't then get up on time, and then that throws off the whole day. So the reason I say your schedule needs to start the night before is you need to identify what time do I need to go to bed so that I can get the amount of sleep that I need so that I can wake up and in the morning, in fact, I've heard, I don't know if this is correct or not, but I've heard that most millionaires or successful people, maybe I say it that way, most successful people wake up in the 5 o'clock hour. So because of that, for me, I always wake up at 5:59 so that I'm in the 5 o'clock hour. I'm kidding. But I have heard it that most people that are successful wake up during the 5 o'clock hour or even potentially sooner. So here's whenever I talk about schedule, I always say, okay, you need to get up at whatever time you're gonna get up in the morning, but the things you need to make sure that you have in that morning schedule is, for me, I always start with reading. So make sure in your schedule that you have some time set aside for you to read, to sit and read. And for me, it's usually about 30 minutes, and it's the first thing I do after I wake up. I get up, I go down to my office, I sit down, and I pull out and start to read, and for 30 minutes, I read. Then after that, the next thing you need to get in your morning is exercise. So the next thing is figure out when you're gonna exercise. And again, for me, I feel like you should exercise in the morning. There are some people who like to do it later in the day, and that's fine. If you wanna do it, in fact, actually, let me even say it this way. I'm gonna give you a list of things, and I'm gonna give you the schedule for our top agent, but what I will tell you is, as long as you do all of these things every day, it doesn't matter when you do them. I have just found, at least for me, I can only speak for myself, but I believe most agents are similar, is some of this stuff, if you don't do it in the morning, you won't do it. And at least I know for me, that's what ends up happening. So exercise. The next one is, and this is dumb that I say this probably, but I still say it, and I'll tell you why I say it. But after you have exercised, then make sure you schedule in some time in your morning to shower. Be clean. In fact, one of the jokes, I mentioned earlier that I have a guy that was a mentor for me, and that guy that was the mentor that helped me get going in training and stuff, in talking to him one day, I had asked him the question. I mentioned to you guys, I've learned you can't tell who's gonna be successful and who's not. And I asked him one day that question. I said, how can you tell who's gonna be successful and who's not? And he said, there's only one way to tell. And I said, what's that? And he said, the smell test. If they stink, they're not gonna be successful in real estate, which we had a good laugh at. But even that's not true. I had actually a guy I trained, this was almost 20 years ago. I had a guy that I trained that remember I said I brought 90 people together every Monday and we would do this training? I had a guy that agents started complaining to me, I don't want to sit by him because he stinks. And I went over by him one time and he stunk. And I was like, well, there's the only way you can tell if somebody's going to be successful. And I was like, he's not going to be successful. But I pulled him aside and I was like, hey, I got to talk to you. I've had some complaints. People are complaining because they feel like you stink. So I don't know if you're not showering. I don't know if you're not washing your clothes, but you got to do something because nobody wants to sit by you. And he actually then told me, confided in me, hey, I've got this gastrointestinal issue that he's like, it's actually not it's not BO, it's not my clothes are dirty, it's like coming out of my mouth. And he's like, I've got these problems. And I just said, well, I don't know what you got to do, get mint, something, but nobody wants to sit by you because they said you stink. Now, here's what happened though. That guy, that was one of the toughest conversations I've had to have in real estate, was telling him nobody wants to sit by you because you stink. But that guy proceeded to lose 60 pounds. And in fact, I ran into him just a few weeks ago and he still looks great. He lost 60 pounds. He doesn't stink anymore, and he's been successful in real estate. So even that, you can't tell if they stink. But however, shower. Now, since then too though, I've had two other times. Once actually on this floor, just on the other side of the building, we were doing a call session. We had a bunch of agents that were there, and then a bunch of the managers were just listening to people make phone calls, and we were coaching them and helping them on their calls. And which, by the way, Every day, 9 o'clock, other than this week since I'm training, but 9 o'clock, we on the third floor, we're doing that. Like me and at least one other manager usually will be there to listen and coach, right? I mean, Alicia knows, I've been there. So every day at 9 o'clock. So come be in here, we'll coach you, we'll help you through it as well. But I was doing that one day here on the second floor, and I was standing there listening to this agent, and I was like, oh my gosh, they stink. It's just rough. And then one other time I think we have somebody from St. George on here as well. I was down in our St. George office and talking with an agent, and the whole time sitting there talking to this particular agent who is still an agent there, so I won't say any names. But if it's not, let me see, make sure it's not who's on. Just kidding, it's not. So anyway, but I'm sitting there talking to this agent, and I was like, oh my gosh. Hers was I shouldn't even say hers, his or her clothes. It was their just dirty clothes. So anyway, so don't stink is the next thing. Make sure you get showered. Obviously eat breakfast, all that kind of stuff. The next thing though then is for you guys that are with Everest, every day at 8 o'clock in the morning, we do morning ascent. So we have our morning ascent meeting here where we kind of get you ready for the day to get started, give some type of inspirational message, that kind of stuff. Then that goes from 8 till 8:30 or quarter to 9, something like that. Then at 9 o'clock is when you should, and again, I'm giving you this ideal schedule, but again, just make sure you have all this stuff in your schedule. Occasionally I'll have somebody that's like, well, I can't do it at that time because I got this or that. That's fine. It doesn't matter. What matters is that you have all this stuff in your schedule and you do it. So 9 o'clock is prospecting. And from 9 until noon should be your time that you set aside as, this is when I'm gonna prospect. I'm gonna, whether it's go out and knock on doors, it's get on the phone and make phone calls. I don't care who you're calling. I don't care if it's just listed, just sold. I don't care if it's an internet lead. I don't care if it's for sale by owners. I don't care if it's expired. I don't care if it's your sphere of influence. In fact, part of what should happen in this should be, and we'll talk about that on Thursday, but your sphere of influence should be called during this time as well. So think of it this way. I like to say this prospecting time is more important than even any appointments that you have. You have got to protect your prospecting time. So everything that's on your schedule, this prospecting has got to be treated like an appointment. So treat it like an appointment. You wouldn't no-show a client to show their house or to list their house. You would never no-show them. Treat your prospecting that same way as this is an appointment. And in fact, I feel like this is more important than any appointment you're gonna get. So if you have somebody that you're in your prospecting and they say, hey, I can meet with you tomorrow at 10, and I know most of you won't do this, but my recommendation is to say, oh, unfortunately, I'm already booked at that time because you have an appointment to prospect, but I could do it later. Now, in the event that they won't, and I get it, most agents are like, I'm not giving up on an appointment to prospect. I understand that. So just know, if you're going to meet with a client during this time, you gotta move this prospecting time down somewhere else, okay? All right, so noon, we'll say that's lunch, so you take lunch from 12 to 1. 1 o'clock then is going to be follow-up, is how I like to say it, is that should be, now some agents do their follow-up during the prospecting, and you could do that as well. In fact, I would say that the busier you get in real estate, you probably will want to move the follow-up up here, but I usually just say that's your time to do your follow-up calls. So people that you have scheduled that you needed to call that day. Then 2 o'clock is appointment prep. So appointment preparation. That's your time that you're gonna get prepped for your appointments. Now, here's what I see most agents do though. They're up here prospecting and they talk to somebody who says, yeah, we'd like to sell our house. So yeah, come on out let's just even say today's Monday, come on out on Thursday and talk to us about getting our home sold. And here's what happens, is the agent sets the appointment to go on Thursday and then they immediately go, all right, now I gotta go do my CMA, I gotta go get all the paperwork ready, and they quit prospecting to go do their appointment prep. So what I'm saying is keep prospecting and know, hey, at 2 o'clock, I can do my appointment prep. Now, the only caveat to that would be if for some reason you had to meet with them at 1 o'clock or something, you might have to do it there. But outside of that, even if you're meeting them at 3 o'clock or 5, my recommendation is you do your appointment prep down here, keep prospecting here, even though you're gonna go meet with them in a couple of hours, whatever, okay? So that's appointment prep. Then what our top agent does is 3 o'clock is an appointment and 5 o'clock is an appointment. And the idea is 6 o'clock home. So the idea is you're not working after 6 o'clock. So think of it no different than like working with a doctor. Like people don't expect their doctor. I was thinking, Abby, that you were. She said I'm in St. George. And I don't know what everyone was. Well, just go around and smell everyone, and then you'll know who I was talking about. Just kidding. I don't know how much that agent comes to the office, but anyway. Okay, so here's the idea though of this. So basically this is what your ideal schedule should look like. But like I said, don't get caught up in, oh, well, I can't do it at that time, or maybe you even say, like, I gotta be home by 5, I can't do appointments at 5. Like, I know of one agent who makes over $1 million a year in real estate, that what she does is her schedule is very similar to this, only her appointments are 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. Because she's like, I'm gonna be home by 4 every single day, making over $1 million a year and is home by 4 every single day. Now, she has an assistant who does like her appointment prep, but up here in the prospecting, she does her prospecting and a lead follow-up. An assistant does her appointment prep, and by 1 o'clock, she's like, I'm out doing appointments. So it doesn't matter when you do this. What matters is you've got to have this stuff just built into your schedule. So whatever your schedule is, again, back to the Chick-fil-A example I like to use. Like, they do not care if they could sell more chicken on Sunday. They're not working on Sunday. And for me, I will tell you this too. For me personally, as an agent, so I had decided that Sunday was going to be my day off. But I also had figured out, like, after 8 o'clock at night, I don't want to be taking phone calls from clients and things. And so, and actually even once I started doing training, I should probably do this again on my voicemail, but I had set up my voicemail on my phone to say, if it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday, I will call you the following business day. And the good thing about doing that, and so why you might want to get your voicemail set up that way, is and I didn't realize this, but it trained my clients that I don't work after 8 p.m. and I don't work on Sunday. So when they would call me, and if they got my voicemail, it would say, hey, this is Russ. If it's after 8 p.m. or Sunday, I will call you the following business day. And so the nice thing is, if a client ever did call me on Sunday, they would always leave the message and be like, hey, Russ, totally fine to call me tomorrow. I just was calling you right now while I was thinking about it, blah, blah, blah. But give me a call tomorrow. I don't have to worry about now feeling guilty, like, oh, I probably should call him back. And I still do that sometimes with agents. I even had an agent yesterday send me a text that was like, hey, Russ, I just sent you an email. What time are you going to be in the office tomorrow so that I can talk to you? And I let him know and talk to him. So the key thing, though, is when you're putting together your business plan and now your schedule, is you have to have in there when you're going to prospect. You got to have scheduled for your follow-up, even if it's just during prospecting is fine. When are you going to do appointment prep, and then when are you going to do your appointments? And if you will do that, it will work. You can make a lot of money in this business and being done at home by 6 o'clock. It does not have to consume your entire life, just so you know. And you can make great money doing it that way. We have another agent that this year, first time he went over $1 million, and he follows this same type of a schedule. Like really, this is essentially his schedule as well. So anyway, all right, any questions on that? All right, next then. So now that we've done that, number 3, the next thing is that, and again, reminder of what this list was what this list came from was George stopping and saying, what is it that top producing agents have or do that I'm not doing or need to do differently, whatever. And number 3 is mindset. What he found is the top producing agents have a strong mindset and they have a positive mindset. And so because of that, you need to be, so back to, I shouldn't have erased it, I have written over here reading in the morning. Like, I believe one of those things that you need to make sure you are doing every single day is taking some time to feed your mind. And so that's why this mindset. Now, one of the other things that we do here at Everest is we send out every morning, we send out a daily message. So every morning at about 7:30, you'll get a text message that is from one of the owners of the company that is giving you some type of a mindset message. And the reason they do that is this. It's tied back to this. We know that most people have a lot of negativity. Like, stop and think about it. When you're on the phone prospecting, you get hung up on, yelled at, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of negativity that goes on. And so we want to help to protect your mindset. So here's how we like to think about it. And what I would say you want to make sure you're doing is, in fact, we have one agent who, and this agent probably does $600,000 in income-ish. And at a company meeting recently, she spoke, and what she said is, I protect my mindset so much. In fact, if you remember, those who know, I have a teenager, so I'm fully aware of this, but Stranger Things came out with some new episodes just like between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And my teenage son, and even my son that's 25 that works for Chick-fil-A that I was telling you about, they were like so excited to watch this. Well, she was talking about this at a meeting, and she said her daughter was like, will you watch Stranger Things with me? And she was like, no. Like, if it's not positive, I'm not putting it into my mind. I'm not. And so, like she said, she watches YouTubes and stuff. So part of, I guess what I'm saying is, on this mindset part is, what are you watching? Or let's start with, what are you reading? What are you watching? What are you listening to? And those things, so like, what are you watching? What are you reading? What are you listening to? Are those things that are building you up and making you better? Zig Ziglar, who did a lot of training for salespeople, one of the things he said is, your car should be a mini university. Like, we spend time driving around in the car rather than just mindlessly listening to stuff. Pick stuff that you can learn something from. So you ought to, in order to have a strong mindset, you got to pay attention to what you're reading, what you're watching, what you're listening to. And then the last one that I'll add up here is, who are you associating with? Are you associating with people who are building you up or tearing you down? Had one guy that was talking one time and said, I noticed that I would go to, he had gone and done a new career but he would meet with the people from his past office for lunch once a week. And he started to notice that on the days he went to lunch with them, he was much more negative. And so he realized, I'm just going to quit hanging out with him. Darren Hardy, who's another person, he used to be the editor of Success Magazine. Darren Hardy, he said, stop and look at every person that you hang out with and figure out, should you spend more time with them? Should you spend less time with them? Or should you not even spend time with them at all? See, and once you figure that out, the people who are building you up, helping you be better, spend more time with. The people who maybe are tearing you down, either get rid of them or limit the amount of time you're spending with them. So all of those things are going to have a huge impact on your mindset. So are the people you're hanging out with building you up, helping you feel like you could be better and do better, or are they tearing you down and negative and saying, oh, real estate will never work and blah, 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 stuff like that. So that's mindset. Pay attention to your mindset, and are the things you're doing going to help strengthen that and make your mindset stronger? Okay. Number 4. Next one is discipline. / accountability. So discipline / accountability. Now, what is the difference? So in fact, I'll ask, but you're probably gonna have to be the only one to answer. What's the difference between discipline and accountability? When you look at that, what do you think of? And you guys on Zoom can unmute if you want.
I think you're accountable to someone else. The discipline is your own monitoring of yourself.
Perfect, that's exactly right. So just in case you guys didn't hear, here's how I say it. Discipline is internal, accountability is external, which is what she said, is accountability is getting someone to hold you accountable and help you be accountable. Discipline is doing it yourself. Here's how the example I like to use on that is a number of years ago. So growing up, I did some running. I never liked it, still don't really like it, but I did some running, but didn't really like it. Then once I hit a certain age, and I don't even remember what it was, but I started to notice that I couldn't eat whatever I wanted, and I needed to exercise to try to keep weight off and eat better. Well, I remember, so 2 things on this that I did in terms of that. I decided I need to start running. And so the first thing that I did is I said, okay, I got to get something out there that is going to pull me or drive me towards exercising. So I went and booked to run the Moab half marathon. And I don't remember how far in advance, but it was long enough in advance that I had time to do a training schedule to get myself that I could go run this half marathon. And then I put together a plan of here's how I'm going to go do it. But when it was time to start running, I was like, I don't know. So I went out and ran, and there's a 2-mile running trail around my neighborhood. And I went out and got in onto the trail and I ran and I don't know if I even made it a mile. And I was like, this is stupid. I'm not doing this. And so I quit. Well, I was like, okay, but I'm going to do this. I'm going to make this happen. So what I did is I was like, okay, on my training schedule, I was like, I got to run 3 miles. So I went to my wife and said, okay, I got to go 3 miles today. And the last couple of times that I've run, I've been like, I've not made it the 3 miles. And I usually did the 2-mile trail and was like, I'm good, done for today. So I said to my wife, you're going to drive me 3 miles from the house. I'm going to get out of the car, you're going to drive home, and now I don't have a choice but to go 3 miles. And I told her, if I try to call you, come pick me up, don't come pick me up. Like, just tell me no, you got to do it. So I ran home and I got home. Well, the other thing that I did was I had a hard time getting myself to get up and go run. So I found 2 other guys in my neighborhood and said, all right, guys, let's hold each other accountable to do this. Because I don't want to get up and run. You guys probably don't really want to get up and run. But if I know you're going to be sitting at the park waiting for me to go run, I'll be there. And so we did that, and the 3 of us would go run around this trail in my neighborhood. Well, that's where, for me, that's where accountability comes into. And I'll say more about that for real estate in a second. But now, where I'm at, that's been so many years now, I'm now to the point where I can go, like this morning, I just did the treadmill because I don't want to go out in the cold, but I ran this morning on the treadmill, and I don't need the accountability anymore because I've gotten myself to the point where I actually enjoy going and doing it by myself. Well, let me rephrase it. I don't enjoy running still, but I enjoy doing it by myself. I would rather throw on my headphones and listen to something while I'm running. Again, back to the mindset part of it, which I actually don't listen to music when I run. I listen to something else, some type of either a book or a podcast or something that's mindset driven. But I don't need the accountability anymore because I've gotten to the point where I'm disciplined enough to do it. And what George found when he put this together is the top producing agents either have someone that holds them accountable or they have the discipline to just do it on their own. In fact, I would tell you accountability is actually a positive, it's not a negative. Accountability is a good thing. And the proof of that is there are agents paying $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month to people to hold them accountable to doing what they know will get them where they want to go to. So if you have, what I'm getting at is if you have the discipline to follow this plan and schedule that we talked about over here, that's great, do it. But if you don't, then have someone hold you accountable to doing it. And in fact, one of the things that we do all the time is accountability contracts. Where we will get somebody that says, hey, I'm going to do this, and if I don't, this is what I will do. Like, I have one guy right now who owes me $2,000, and this was his doing, not mine, but he came to me and said, I want you to hold me accountable to do what I'm going to show you guys on Thursday with your sphere of influence. And he said, I'm going to do these certain metrics, and if I don't by this date, I'll pay you $500. And if I don't by this date, I'll pay you another $500. And if I don't by this date, it'll be another $500. And if I don't by this date, it'll be another $500. Well, he came to me and was like, I'm going to be behind. Can you give me an extension? And I said, yeah, like, you're doing it. You're just not there yet, but I will give you one extension, and you got to do it. And so I gave him an extension, and then he still didn't do it. So now he's like, I owe you $2,000 because I didn't hit those metrics. Now, the good news is he still did part of it, and as a result, he's got some good stuff going in the works. But that's what this looks like, is if you have the discipline to do it on your own, great, do it. But if you don't, then go find somebody to hold you accountable. Set up an accountability contract. Hey, if I don't do this by this time. Now, key thing though is, when you're going to do accountability, it's got to hurt. You've got to set it up to where it's going to hurt. Because otherwise, like, I've seen sometimes people be like, hey, I'll come prospect from 9 to noon, and if I don't, I'll give you $20. And then they just walk in and hand them the $20 because they're like, I just didn't want to do it. Like, but 5,000, you're probably going to be like, yeah, I'm not just going to walk in and be like, I didn't want to do it. Here's $5,000. So if you're going to set up accountabilities with somebody, do it that way. So either get someone to hold you accountable if you're not disciplined. For me, as a new agent, one of the things that I did is I found another agent at the office and I said, let's hold each other accountable to prospect every day. That's where I got this idea of, hey, let's meet at 9 o'clock and make phone calls and all meet together, is because even still today, like, if somebody doesn't show up, then we send them a text and we're like, hey, why aren't you here? You said you were going to come and be here. So show up. So set that up. I had a lady that did that with me. In fact, she and I would go door knock every day, and I'll say more about that this afternoon. But she and I would go door knock every day, and she would hold me accountable, and I would hold her accountable. If she ever tried to say I can't go, or if I said I can't go, she would be right all over it. No, you're going. And I would do the same with her. No, like, you said you want to make this money, you got to go do it. And so we'd hold each other accountable. So if you're disciplined enough to get yourself to follow your schedule and do it, great. But if not, get someone to hold you accountable. And that's what we have found is top producers either have the discipline to do it on their own, but if they don't, they find someone to hold them accountable to do it. And if you do that, you're more likely to follow through and do it. Okay. All right, number 5. Number 5, I'm going to put over here, because we're going to need more room. Number 5 is skill sets. And what we have found is there are 12 skills that top producing agents have or do that you need to master. So so I'm going to give you here the 12 skills, and what I want you to do though is pay attention as we go through it, and what I would like you to do is rate yourself on these skills. Rate yourself. Wouldn't it be great, by the way, if real estate school would have been more like this? Like, hey, teach me how to be successful. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I hope you don't think that. But I just know why I do this too was I struggled for about 1.5 years in the business before somebody taught me all this stuff. And then once I learned it, man, my business took off. So I just always am like, when I get to this kind of stuff, I'm like, I wish real estate school included some of this of like, hey, let's show you what this is going to look like. All right, so skill set. So there's 12 skills. And let's go through and talk about these 12 skills. And while I do that, I want you to rate yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. How good are you? And the reason I want you to rate yourself, and you don't have to tell me, but I want you to rate yourself so that at the end of this, you can know, where do I need to focus? What do I need to work on in terms of my skill sets? All right, so number 1. Number 1, we're going to call lead generation, or I'm going to even say it as, we could say prospecting
or you could say it as setting appointments, okay? So that's a skill, is generating leads, setting appointments, all of that kind of stuff. Prospecting is a skill, and we're going to work on that one this afternoon. We're gonna, like looking at the clock, we're not gonna have time to get into it till after lunch. But we're gonna go through and we're gonna work on this lead generation, and I'm gonna show you like how do you do it to where you can set appointments to get the business going for you so that you can have the money that you want. So rate yourself, like how good are you at prospecting, setting appointments, lead generation, okay? Number 2 is lead follow-up. So the second skill is lead follow-up. How good are you at lead follow-up? And I will tell you, this skill is probably, and again, while we go through this, keep thinking about this discipline and accountability, because again, on some of these skill sets, you might need someone to hold you accountable. So for example, I will give you an example here of lead follow-up. And I will even tell you, one of the things you guys are gonna see as we go through this week is I'm gonna keep talking about and sharing with you all the ways that I screwed up and how to not do it. And I will say lead follow-up, when I watch agents, and I've done this for a lot of years now where I will watch agents, lead follow-up is the thing that hurts most agents. That is the one thing that keeps agents from being successful, is they don't do lead follow-up. And I'll tell you, without a system in place, I'm guilty of it as well. So I'll give you a quick story here. Oh, perfect timing, Andy. I was just gonna talk about you. If you're there.
Well, I'm here.
Good, you timed it perfectly for lead follow-up. I really wasn't gonna talk about you.
I was just going to text you and say that same thing.
Okay, so lead follow-up. Lead follow-up is the thing that I see most agents struggle with in real estate. Is we're great at going out and generating a lead and somebody's saying call us back, but then most agents, and myself included, so I can joke and call Andy out on this because I'm guilty of it, and I'll tell you guys a quick story on that. So I went to get my hair cut a couple of years ago. While I'm getting my hair cut, the lady cutting my hair says, "What do you do for a living?" And so, thanks, Andy. So anyway, I said I sell real estate, and the lady cutting my hair says, "Oh, you need to talk to this person, the hairstylist that was right next to us." And I said, "Oh, really? Why's that?" And she said, "Oh, because she's smart and she wants to buy a duplex and live in one side and rent the other side out." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And so then she heard us talking about her, and she's like, "What?" And she's like, "Oh, he sells real estate. And I was telling him you wanted to buy a duplex." And I was like, "Yeah, give me your information and I'll look it up for you. I'll find you a duplex." And she's like, "Well, good luck." Because now remember, this is a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, and inventory is still low. I mean, I don't know if you guys on the screen can see here where our active listings are at, but inventory is still low, but it was even lower then. And she was like, "Good luck finding something. I can't find anything." And I was like, "I'll find something." So I got her information, I came back to the office, had it on a sticky note, set it down, and I did some searches and was having a hard time finding what she wanted. She was right. There really wasn't a whole lot out there. And so I was like, shoot, I guess I'll check tomorrow. And then tomorrow turned into the next day and the next day, and 6 weeks went by, and it was time to get my hair cut again, and I hadn't called her, hadn't found her a property. So I did what all good real estate agents would do, and I went to a different hair salon to get my hair cut because I was embarrassed that I didn't follow up. So I go get my hair cut somewhere else, and then 6 weeks go by and I still haven't called her. And I was like, time to get a haircut. And I was like, I'm just going back to that place. So I go back to that place to get my haircut and hope she's not going to be there. She was there. So I'm getting my haircut and I was like, all right, I got to fix this because like I blew it. I didn't call her back, but I can salvage it. I can still do this. So I said, hey, I don't remember what her name was now, but I said, hey, so-and-so. And I said, we had talked like 12 weeks ago, so 3 months.
Like we talked like 3 months ago and you were wanting to find a duplex and I've been doing some searches, but I haven't found anything yet for you. And she's like, oh, that's okay. You don't have to worry about it. I actually bought something already. And she didn't buy it. She didn't end up buying a duplex. So my point in that is if I would have done my job and if I would have called her back and just the next day or 2 days later even and been like, hey, you're right. I'm having a hard time finding anything that fits for what you're looking for. But, would you consider anything else? Do you want, how set are you? Do you want me to keep doing that? I guarantee you, because she did not have an agent when I first met her, I guarantee you I could have had that deal if I'd have done lead follow-up, but I didn't. So that's a skill. So rate yourself. On a scale of 1 to 10, where would you say you are in terms of lead follow-up? And maybe that's something you say for this year, I'm going to improve on this. So, because you're going to notice when you go through your business plan, which hopefully you guys saw that on Zoom, I dropped it in the chat box. And if for some reason you didn't get it, let me know and I can, I'll email it to you or something. But one of the sections asks, like, what skill are you going to work on this year? And maybe that's your lead follow-up that you're going to work on. So that would be it. Okay, number 3 is pre-qualifying. So I'm just going to write it as pre-qual. But pre-qualifying. How good are you at doing pre-qualification? Okay, so pre-qualification. Pre-qualification is you qualifying the lead, but that doesn't mean like, can they qualify to buy a house? So I'm not talking about like getting a loan on the house when I say pre-qualify, although that is part of it. But when I'm talking about pre-qualification, it's, are you finding out their motivation? That is all about qualifying them based on their motivation. Now, we will talk about more this afternoon as we get into this on the lead generation. But for me, what I don't want you doing is qualifying somebody before you set the appointment. Set the appointment, then you worry about qualifying them. Sometimes what agents will do is get on the phone and rather than set an appointment, they'll start asking questions about the person's motivation and this and that first. And I'm telling you, first set the appointment, and it's fine if before you hang up, you move into pre-qualifying them. So I'm not having a problem with that. But first, what I want your mind thinking is my first objective. In fact, let me do a little side note on this. In your prospecting, your first thing you're trying to do is find out needs and wants, okay? You're trying to find out what are the needs and the wants that the person has, and then as soon as I figure that out, I'm gonna try to set an appointment second. So first find out needs and wants, then I wanna schedule an appointment, and then from there you can start to ask about the motivation of, what's causing you to sell and, blah, blah, blah. Now, and what would happen if you didn't sell and those type of things. So pre-qualification is a skill. Most agents don't do it. And then you end up showing up to an appointment that you find out that the person is like, well, yeah, like I'll give you an example. I owned some, I don't have them anymore, but I owned some investment properties in Mississippi. And I would get calls and texts, and you guys probably get them even still today too. I would get calls and texts of people saying, hey, would you be interested in selling your property? And every time my answer was, yeah, I'd be interested in selling it. And, but I was only going to sell it for a certain price. And so I was not going to be a great seller for that person that was contacting me because I'm like, yeah, I'll sell it, but you got to pay me more than it's worth. Like everybody out there would sell their property for a price. So just know that there are very few people that wouldn't sell if you gave them the right price. It's just, unfortunately, the right price is usually too high. And if you don't pre-qualify, you'll end up out on an appointment with somebody where at the very end you find out, well, I'm not really wanting to sell. I just was like, yeah, if you'll pay me, if you could get me $5 million for my home that's worth $500,000, I'll sell it. Like, that's the idea of this pre-qualification is ultimately. And I'm not even saying you don't go on the appointment. I'm just saying before you go on the appointment, you want to know what the motivation is going to be, okay? Number 4, that is going to be, and these aren't necessarily in an order, it's just kind of what I'm thinking of as I'm writing them up here. And this one I might have to go look at if I don't remember. We'll see if I can get all 12 off the top of my head. But number 5 is gonna be then your presentation. So, and again, we're gonna work on this skill tomorrow and Thursday for both the buyer and the seller of what is your presentation. So I would ask from you to rate yourself, scale of 1 to 10, how good is your presentation? Do you have a presentation that you follow, and where is it at on a 1 to 10? Because again, back to what we talked about, if you are not in a position where you are comfortable and feel good about your presentation, you're gonna be hesitant to get on the phone and make phone calls, or go knock on doors. But if you feel good about it and you know what to do and you're not worried about doing it, you'll get on the phone because you're not afraid of somebody saying, yeah, come meet with us. We want to sell our house. We'll go figure it out. So how good is your presentation skills, okay? Number 5 is, I'm going to do it as handling objections. How good are you at handling objections? And there's a difference between an objection and a condition. A condition is something you can't overcome. Somebody who filed bankruptcy, and some people would argue on this too, that you could do a seller finance or something, but if somebody just filed bankruptcy, that's more of a condition. You're not gonna go get them a loan. You know, somebody who has really bad credit, you know, probably that's more of a condition than an objection. Now, again, like I said, you could make the argument of if they have a good down payment, you could go get a seller finance, and that's true. But just kind of keep an eye in mind that there are objections and conditions. Conditions are going to be things we can't do anything about. An objection is really nothing more than an unanswered question in the person's mind. So when somebody says to you, we need to think about it, that's an objection. And really what that means is we just still have some questions that you haven't quite answered yet. So how good are you at handling objections? The other thing I'll tell you is objections typically are the same. And I would say in my 30 years of doing real estate, the objections are still the same. I've got a friend in the business. We want to think about it overnight. We want a lower commission. Like all of those things are the same. They've never changed. Nothing has changed in the objection. The question is, do you know what to say and how to deal with it when that comes up to help you overcome that? So that's a skill. Number 6 is we'll do pricing. How good are you at pricing property? So I will usually tell agents, if you're not comfortable with pricing property, you should be doing a CMA every single week. Even if you just pick a random house out there and just be like, which usually I recommend, pick a house that is for sale, go do a CMA on it, see if you think it's priced fairly, priced too high or too low. Probably not too low or else it wouldn't be for sale still. But if it's still for sale, do a CMA on it and then keep an eye on it. Like don't spend a ton of time keeping an eye on it, but periodically go back and look at it and see, hey, if you did a CMA and you say, hey, I feel like it's probably $50,000 overpriced, look back in a month and see, hey, was I right? Did it sell? And if it didn't, or if it did, whatever, see, did it sell for what you thought it would? That's what's going to give you confidence on pricing, is if you can go and look at it. Now, I will just say real quick on this, when it comes to pricing property, you can never outguess the market. You can do your best, but you can never outguess the market. I'll give you a couple of examples. First one, property that I bought as a flip. So this was one, I did some bank foreclosures, and I had a property that I had listed for sale, and we had somebody go through it, and it had a crawl space underneath the house, and I hadn't been under the crawl space. I had it listed for the bank. Somebody went and looked at it and called me and was like, hey, were you aware there was a fire at that property? And I was like, no, which I had one other one that I had listed the property and then the fire happened, which that's a whole other story I can tell you sometime. But this one, they said, were you aware there had been a fire in this property? And I was like, no. And they're like, well, you ought to go take a look. So I went in the crawl space and looked, and I could see that, yeah, there was one of the support joists that you could tell had been on fire. And I was like, oh crap. So I called up the bank and told the bank, hey, found out there was a fire here that we weren't aware of. And so we're going to need to reduce the price. So the lady at the bank calls me back, says, hey, we're going to reduce the price to X. And I was like, are you serious? Like, I'll buy it for that. And she was like, go ahead, buy it. So I did. So I bought the house. And I called then. In fact, actually, I called the guy that what I said was self-employed, that still is self-employed. I called that contractor that I worked for, and I was like, hey, will you come out and look at this and tell me like what we need to do to fix it? He came out and looked at it, and he's like, you know what, I'll throw another floor joist in next to it. But he's like, that fire was so minor that he's like, structurally, this joist is still good. But he's like, if you threw another one in there next to it, you're really good. Like, so I wouldn't worry about it. So we did. And then I bought the home and turned around and sold it. Now, here's the thing though. During the time I was rehabbing this property, I kept getting a ton of interest, and I realized, hey, what I did my CMA on, so my pricing, I realized I might have been too low. So I listed it at a significantly higher price than I had planned to, which is a good thing. But then what happened though is I started getting tons of showings, like more showings than I had ever gotten. And I was like, holy cow, I may have still underpriced it. But I got no offers, no offers, no offers. And I was like, what is going on? I'm getting all these showings and no offers. So I finally one day was like trying to figure it out at the office. And I'm like, what is going on? Because my experience is, and we can talk about this later during the listing presentation, but if you're getting a ton of offers and ton of showings and no offers, you're overpriced. So I was trying to figure it out, and I'm like, like we totally rehabbed the place. I'm like, so I know it's not the condition. What's the problem? So I finally decided I'm going to get in the car and go drive there and look at the property as if I'm looking at it through the eyes of a buyer. So I get to the property, I get out, I walk in, and I walk through the entire property, and I'm sitting there and I'm just like, I do not know, like, why are people coming in and not wanting to buy the property? And I was trying to get feedback, but the feedback was always just like, it just isn't what they want. And I was like, okay. So I look at the property, I'm like, there's nothing that we did. And I turned around and it had a big window, like probably the size of two of these ones. And I'm standing there looking at it and standing there just thinking to myself, like, why is this not selling? And I'm looking out the window and all of a sudden I go, wait a minute. And I realized, and I've known this the whole time, but right across the street, like, so just like, and when I say like across the street, not like what you would see here, but like literally just across the street is a power substation. And I was like, the view standing in the front room is of a power substation. And it hit me. That's the problem. And so I then reduced the price to just a little higher than where my plan was in getting the property sold, and it immediately sold. And so that's part of what I'm saying on pricing is like, it is an art, not a science. And sometimes, like, it probably, if it would have been two houses down, would have been no problem. Even though there was a power substation, you didn't sit and stare at it sitting on your porch or whatever. So how good are you at pricing property? And then number 7, which I'll keep on. Number 7 is price reductions. That is a skill of getting price reductions. And how good are you at getting price reductions? And I will tell you that the skill of that is tied to future pacing. If you will future pace your client, and I always tell my clients when I'm out listing their property, I tell them, the market is going to speak to us in a cryptid language. That my job for you is to interpret what the market is telling you. And then we'll talk about this in the listing presentation more. But I future pace them to let them know, hey, we're going to keep an eye on the number of showings we're getting and the number of offers that we're getting. And if you are getting no showings, no offers, the market's telling you it's too high. Because people are looking online. They're seeing your house. And I'll prove it to you by sending to you a report showing you how many people are seeing it. And if they're seeing it not coming, it's because there's either something wrong with the price or the condition. So I'm helping them future pace to, hey, we got to keep an eye on this stuff because in the event that we miss it, we gotta adjust the price. So how good are you at price reductions? All right, number 8 is, let's do customer service. Customer service. That's the next skill. How good are you, how good is your customer service? We have had some agents come through our brokerage, and maybe even potentially still have some, that are great at getting the deal, but do horrible customer service. Like, I have watched a lot of agents that are horrible at customer service. They're great at getting properties listed for sale, not great at servicing those. And you are not going to get repeat business or referrals from those people. And as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you how to work with your SOI on Thursday, but you have got to give the customer service that the people want to work with you again. When I get the calls as the broker from people complaining and upset that something their agent's done, it's like, I know it's the agents who don't give good customer service that I get those calls from. The agents who do good customer service, very, very rare that I'm going to get a phone call from them. So a great book to recommend for that one for you to read is called Raving Fans. Can't remember the author on that, but Raving Fans is the author of that one. All right, next, number 9 is working with highly qualified buyers. So that one's a little bit longer. I would say working with highly qualified buyers. You want to make sure that you're working with highly qualified buyers, because if you are out running around with people who are not highly qualified, what you're going to do is you're going to end up spending a ton of time helping people that are never going to buy, that cost you a ton of time. I'll give you a quick story on that too. Had an agent from up in Park City that was coming to trainings, and he kept telling me about this $1 million buyer. Now, that $1 million house in today's market would probably be 4 or 5 million, like based on where prices were then versus where they are now. And he kept showing houses to this guy, and the guy would never buy. And I figured out pretty quickly that he was not going to really buy anything. And so I started telling this agent, you're wasting your time. You're out working with somebody who is costing you money. And he's like, how's he costing me money? I'm going to make $30,000 when he buys. And I was like, I understand, but I'm telling you, based on what you're telling me, my experience says he's not going to buy. Well, one day the agent comes into the training and he goes, hey, Russ, I figured out what you meant. And I'm like, what do you mean you figured out what I meant? And he said, well, so we had an office in Park City that was on Main Street, and it was during this time of year where like Sundance Festival is going on up there. And it is not uncommon that people would come in, well, probably not this year, but it's not uncommon for people to come into Utah to ski in Park City. And then while they're here, they love that we have the greatest snow on earth, and would be like, not this year, we don't, but we have the greatest snow on earth. And so they would be like, we got to buy a place here. And it was not uncommon for somebody just to walk into an office there and be like, hey, we want to buy a house here. So this guy was there at the office on Main Street, gets a call from the guy that says, hey, I want to go see this house in Jeremy Ranch. So he gets up and goes and finds another agent in the office and says, hey, Alicia, I'm going to go show this guy a house. If anybody walks in, he was on what we called floor time. So if anybody walked in, he would get them. So he said to this agent, hey, I'm going to go show this house. While I'm gone, if anybody comes in, do you want to take them? And she's like, yeah, I'll be here. That's fine. So he leaves, drives to Jeremy Ranch, shows the guy the house. The guy doesn't write an offer, goes back to the office, walks in, and Alicia says, hey, thanks for telling me you were leaving. And he's like, what do you mean? She's like, while you were gone, these people walked in and said, we found this property we want to buy, $1.2 million, we're going to pay cash. Will you write the offer? So while he was gone, showing a buyer that was not highly qualified, didn't have the motivation, while he was gone, she wrote a cash offer for $1.2 million that was going to close like in a week or 2 weeks. And he's like, I understand what you mean now by be careful of where you're spending your time, because I went out chasing around with this guy, and because of it, it cost me a buyer. So that's the opportunity cost, is going and showing somebody that's not real is going to cost you. Okay, all right, number 10. Number 10 is negotiating. How good of a negotiator are you? So that's a skill that you want to work on and get better at, is in terms of your negotiating. And I will, on this one, I will just say, when it comes to negotiating, the key thing on that is knowing what your client wants. Which again, if we come back to this purpose, vision, dreams, and why, if you can find out from your client, hey, and back to pre-qualifying, what's the motivation on this? Part of what you do in the negotiations with them is finding out what is most important to them. And I'm going to show you that in both the listing presentation and our buyer presentation, is if you can know what's important to them, you're going to be able to negotiate better on their behalf and be able to help them, okay? All right, let's see. I do need to look at, I already said one that I didn't write down. Was future pacing, number 11. I said it's tied to future pacing and I didn't write it down. So number 11 is future pacing. Future pacing, which we did talk about, that is the idea of you telling the client, hey, we're going to keep an eye on the number of listings we're getting, the number of showings. If we're not getting showings and offers. If we're not getting showings and offers, that's the market's way of telling you you need to adjust your price. See, if you tell them that up front, then when you call them the next week and you're like, hey, we had no showings, as you're aware, and because we had no showings, we also had no offers, and week after week you're telling them that and sending them, here's how many people looked online. You've already future paced them. The other place you want to future pace your clients is, hey, when we get an offer, plan on the buy, like depending on the price range of the property, I always tell my clients, plan on the buyer's going to ask you to pay their commission for their agent, and they're going to ask you to pay for closing costs. So let's just plan on that. Don't be surprised when you get an offer. That's future pacing. The other way you future pace your clients is you want to say, hey, when we do get an offer in on your house, they're going to come through and do an inspection. Don't be surprised after they do an inspection, they're going to come back and ask you to do stuff. The way that I always future paced my clients, my first listing I ever had was a guy that lived behind me, kitty corner, and the buyers did their inspection, and when they came back, they gave us a list, I'm not lying, 72 items, things they wanted repaired. So I went to my client and was like, hey, here's these 72 things. Which, by the way, I think actually that agent I was dealing with was a very good negotiator, is what I kind of learned. Because in meeting with that guy, the agent that brought the offer, back in those days, 30 years ago, when somebody wrote an offer, they either showed up at the seller's house or to your office to present the offer. We actually really negotiated and presented rather than just, hey, I'm sending you an offer, here it is. So he shows up at my office to present his offer to me, and when he presented the offer to me, he asked, hey, so how long you been in real estate? And I was like, this is my first deal I've ever done, I'm brand new. And he was like, yeah. I said, how about you? And he's like, oh, I'm still getting my feet wet too. Now, it made me feel, oh, good, we got two rookies working together. I found out later on, though, he had been in business for 4 or 5 years. So it was just some good negotiating on him. It made me feel comfortable. But he gave me this list of 72 items. My clients went through and were like, we're not doing all that. We'll do these major ones. And I think that's all they really wanted anyway. Because when I went back and said, well, they're not going to do all that stuff, but they will do these 4 or 5, he was like, okay, that's good enough. So that's the idea, though, of future pacing. So now I tell my clients when I go on a listing, hey, the worst I've ever seen is, and you could use this now when you go with the seller too, is, hey, the worst we've ever seen. But the worst I've ever seen is somebody did an inspection. They gave us a list of 72 items that they wanted repaired. So anything you get that's less than 72 items, we should be grateful for. That way, when the buyers show up and they give us a list and they're like, hey, we want these 5 things, I'm amazed at how many times my clients have been like, whew, they're only asking for 5. They didn't ask for 30 or whatever. It makes it, now it doesn't always mean that the clients will do all of them, but they at least are going to be like, oh, good, we only got asked for 5. They didn't ask us for 20 or whatever. So that's the idea of how you want to do future pacing. All right, let me see what I'm forgetting. Oh, duh. Number 12. And this is tied to what we talked about earlier. Number 12 is closing. So that's a skill. And the reason I think I always, hey, what's up? The reason I think I always forget about number 12 of being closing is because what I said to you guys earlier. A good presentation, the natural ending is that the client is saying, great, what do we need to do? Or you're just after you've gone through your presentation able to say, so how soon do you want to get started? It's not any tactics. Now there are some that we can teach you which are like the if then close or the 3 no close, the 3 yes close. We have one that we can do that's the master close. But so there are some of those, but just know if you do everything right, closing's easy. You just say, hey, so when did you want to get started? And that's it. All right. Oh, it's time.
Sorry.
She's got the alarm telling us it's time for lunch. All right, let me give you number 6 real quick and then we'll stop. Okay, so give me 2 more minutes and we'll be done. And that number 6 then on this list is systems, tools, and strategies. So of our 6 items for our foundation, of again, back to what George found is the secret that top producing agents have is a purpose, vision, dreams, why, goals, plan, schedule, strong mindset, have somebody, they're either disciplined enough to do it or have someone hold them accountable. They've got these 12 skills. And then number 6 is they have systems, tools, and strategies that they use. And so for the sake of time, we won't get into too much of this, but I will just say, one of the things that I mentioned to you guys is giving to your clients each week. Here's the number of people who viewed your property. You can get that from the MLS, but there are also other systems and tools that most companies have that you can use to say, hey, here's how many views we had on your property. And so you want to have a handful of those. The other thing I will tell you, and then we'll wrap up, is on the business plan. In the business plan, it asks about what systems or what tools are you going to implement into your business. And so every year you should be taking a look at, like, what's the CRM you're using? And do you have something to help you do the lead follow-up? Something that's going to tell you every day, here's who you need to call. So that's what I mean by systems, tools, and strategies is, do you have those things in place that help you on these other pieces so that you've got your CRM that you're going to use and what system you're going to use, like List Hub or Golden Ruler, to let the clients know, here's how many views we got on your properties. So those are the foundations, and that's the business plan stuff that I got for you. So unless you guys have questions, what we will do is we'll stop for lunch now, and then 1:30 we'll pick back up again. So for y'all, you guys, since most everybody is on Zoom anyway, so be back on at 1:30, and then we're gonna start to go through, okay, so how do we do this lead generation prospecting stuff in a way that helps us actually set appointments so we can make some money, okay? Okay, questions? All right. We had one person unmute and he's gone, so off Zoom. So, okay, so for you guys, so I'm gonna stop the Zoom right now. And the reason I'm doing that is because this is recorded and I will have it available too. So I'm gonna stop the Zoom so that just to break up the recordings. So same link, we'll use the exact same link for starting at 1:30, but this way you'll have the recording. So anyway, so I'm gonna boot you guys off and then we'll pick back up at 1:30.